D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Hello, Gamer Nation, and welcome to the Dice Ball Podcast, covering everything that you've ever wanted to know about how to run and play in the GeneSys Role Playing Game by Fantasy Flight Games. I'm your host, GM Hooly, and now we've got a fun episode lined up for you all, where we'll be discussing our favourite fandoms and how we'd approach putting them into the narrative system of GeneSys. But before we go any further, let me introduce you to my co-hosts, GM Huzz, GM Flano and GM Kaitlin. Now, normally I would introduce them with a little bit more flair, but I'm simply dumbstruck by their sheer levels of amazingness. So, how are we all? Welcome back to the new year, 2019. Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. And I am very, very stoked that you finally have realised that we are that amazing.
That you don't need an introduction.
We don't need an introduction, but
There
yeah,
you
we've got
go.
an introduction.
He still introduced us.
I know. He's still learning.
Training wheels, Martin. Training wheels. So what has everybody been up to? It's been like since we've had all four of us, because we've had different ring-ins with GM Mick and GM Chris and whatever else. So, but it's been a little bit of a while. What have we been up to since we last met? Mike.
What have I been up to? Christmas, New Year's, usual thing. Gaming-wise, lots of MechWarrior Online. Because now,
Still?
Well, I had 2 weeks off for Christmas.
Oh, okay.
And I clocked disgustingly over 100 hours on MechWarrior Online in those 2 weeks. I know this because Steam always reminds me of my playtime. Every time I boot it up, I'm like, well, thanks, Steam.
Wow.
It's now reaching absurd levels of time. And I blame GM Flano for this.
Right.
I use expletives that I can't use on the podcast to describe him, but he's aware of how I feel. That's okay.
I'm proud of it.
Other than that, usual stories, some role play here and there, not as much as I like. I'm looking at certain people at the table, blaming them for that.
Right. That's me. Just so you know.
I don't want to name names. Here we are. But no, I've been, chilling, doing work, had a holiday. That was great. Haven't had a holiday for a long time. So I did not a lot, but play MechWarrior, as I said. Been diving deeply back into Aristea, which is a the greatest sports miniatures game around. It says it on the box.
Does it?
And I agree.
It has to be better than Blood Bowl.
This
is.
ruler,
It
this
is.
inanimate object I'm holding in my hand,
It's better than Blood Bowl.
is better than Blood Bowl. I can. Yeah, it's great.
Well,
Right.
we were actually talking about this because I played a game with Huzz not too long ago. Aristea is better, mainly because with Blood Bowl, it's about the league and it's about the progression over many games. And if someone gets a steamroll on, then they're just going to crush.
Right.
Because there's progression between games, right? But with Aristea, each game, there's no progression for your players throughout the thing. It's each game is self-contained.
Oh, okay.
But it's very well balanced. And if you added that in, it'd spoil all of that.
Right.
So each game is its own competitive, like razor edge. It could go either way sort of thing.
Okay.
Well, I played a game yesterday, and we did a draft play where we alternated picking team members. And my opponent, he accidentally, because he's new to the game, picked a crew that had no attacks.
Oh,
No attacks.
All ability based, and it still was a very, very, very close game. It came down to the one last dice roll, the last turn to decide who won. And that's a testament to how well balanced the game is. If the crew that doesn't have guns can compete, or not necessarily guns, attacks, compete against an aggressive force.
because everyone has a basic attack that they can make, but
You rarely ever use it.
because it's not very strong.
Right.
But certain characters have more powerful attacks and things like that. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
That's been me anyway.
Right.
In a nutshell. On a tangent, but that's what happens.
Interesting. Martin, what have you been up to?
I played some Aristea. I played some MechWarrior.
some mech warrior.
Don't
You
judge
are
me.
a liar. A liar and an enabler.
Wow.
Yeah. Other than that, I didn't even have any holidays. I had my boss come to me not too long ago and say, "You need to take some holidays. You've come up on the list of people that haven't taken holidays in a while."
Wow.
So I'm all booked in.
What a monster.
I'm all
Nice.
booked in to come over and see you, Caitlin. I organised that.
And also go to Game Nation Con at the same time.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
What's
yeah.
that?
I mean, that's
Hey. Already. Weren't we just talking about our sheer levels of awesomeness?
That's what I'm saying. It's only just a side thing. It's supposed to come and see you, Kat. So,
That's right.
yeah.
But yeah, not enough gaming, but you know.
Jeez. I'm going to get all of this down.
No, but yeah, we played a few board games and things, but that's about it. So
Right.
yeah.
Wow. Cool. Caitlin, what have you been up to?
Oh, so we went to Kansas for
Right.
Christmas, which was amazing. I was hoping to see some snow, but unfortunately it was just not in the cards. It happens to be snowing there quite heavily now, though, which I'm getting lots of photos of, but I didn't have the chance to actually experience it myself. But it was still a really wonderful Christmas and New Year, which I managed to get some time away from the office myself. I've been doing quite a bit of gaming. We've got my Star Wars campaign going on here as well with a couple of my friends here. I just created a new character for it as well, which I am pretty keen on. I think he is pretty cool.
Did
I'm trying to...
Sorry, Caitlin. Did your hut die?
No, he is currently traveling away for a little while.
Okay.
Mainly because the story then took a tangent along really heavy Jedi storylines, which my hut couldn't participate in because it was like Jedi only secret business. So that didn't really quite work out for the hut character that I had. So he's just currently on the moment, he's just on another mission elsewhere.
Okay.
And we'll come back at some point. But at the moment, I created a new Jedi. Padawan. I wasn't very, I don't know, I wasn't very strategic in my character creation, but I just made my character like super young and a Padawan still. Is not full Jedi class yet, but he's still pretty cool. I really like him.
Cool.
And then on top of that, still playing some Dungeons and Dragons, which I have a session next week, which I'm super excited about. We've just managed to grab a whole bunch of land for ourselves, which we can choose to do whatever we want. And we were talking about having our own little bar there, which we have to then manage. I want to personally create a little school of thieves for all the orphans out there, because my character's background is a thief. Teaches them how to like live on the streets, but then also gets a handy cut from what they're learning while they're out and about traveling. So little things about expanding that story is pretty cool. Plus, on top of that, been playing lots of board games as well. One of the highlights of that has been Attack on Tokyo or King of Tokyo. I don't know if any of you guys have played that, but it is so much fun.
It's a great game.
Oh, I've
been playing Mecha Dragon every single time, and I just love him. And being with Chase, he happens to have this amazing addiction where whenever he likes something or a game, he has to have absolutely everything to do with that game, which is really quite handy, seeing as I live in the same house with him. So he played it once, and before we finished the first game of that, he had already had every expansion on order ready coming to the house. So yeah, it's been a lot of that. Lots of gaming, lots of socializing, lots of spending some time away from the office, even though we're now back into the swing of things. New year.
Very good.
Nice. Speaking of D&D, I recently played in my on and off again D&D campaign that I'm a part of.
Right.
But how did you have any time after all those 100 hours you've been putting into
I am a man of many
managed.
talents, and I squeezed it in.
He had a laptop and was playing it on the side.
That's a half true. And my character, which is a Drow Ranger, is currently leading not Drow Ranger, sorry.
I was going to say, what, another drow?
How
surprising.
No, Drow. What are they called? The horned people.
Tiefling?
Tiefling. That's the one.
Tiefling.
Tiefling. Potato, tomato. That's it.
Did you say potato tomato?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Hey, my
the
D&D
meme.
character's a tiefling too.
Oh,
Way to
there you
go. Nice choice.
Tieflings all around. But
jeez.
she's currently leading a 30,000 strong Drow army.
Oh.
And is conquering the land in the name of the local king.
Hold on. Are you just telling the story to one up my little orphan school?
No,
Now you're like, well,
I'm
my
just telling the story
tiefling
because
has
it's an
an
awesome
army.
story. Hey, you've got goals now for your orphanage. Conquer the land, children.
You know what's going to happen?
Step 1. Thievery. Step 2.
No, your tiefling army can go against my tiefling army, except what's going to happen then is that you're going to wake up on the morning of the battle and all your weapons are going to be gone.
Mine's a drow army, so they fight at night.
Oh, fair enough.
So it'll counter your
in the
orphanage
evening,
army.
when you wake up in the evening, all your weapons are going to be gone.
Damn it.
See, I'm picturing the whole Empire versus Ewoks, but, that might be just me. Anyway, clearly it is. Anyway, moving along.
We'll give Ian looks right now.
I went to a much darker place. I figured that your war was going to create a lot of orphans.
It has.
So this is like the
excellent.
prequel.
My army.
It's a prequel to Caitlin's army. My
Exactly.
army, in a way, my army fuels Caitlin's future army.
Yes.
You're
We
welcome.
just created a setting. I think we have.
Yeah,
I can sense a crossover happening. Yes. Anyway,
I like it.
so as far as gaming that I've been up to, I've been up to a little bit. Played some D&D, played a whole heap of board games over Christmas with friends. Been getting into a regular Saturday night sort of games fest, and they're addicted as well as I'm addicted as well to Bang.
Yeah, Bang's a great game.
The Bang's a great game.
It's a real banger.
Look, I've tried to get you guys to play it a few times.
Really? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I've like way back, I think 2 years ago, I bought the big bullet.
I love the bullet.
And this conversation is going strange places. So I'm just going to bring it back.
I think it'll be a lot shorter conversation if we ask what you don't like, Martin.
Yeah, that's right.
No, there's a few things.
I'm yet to find any.
But yeah, we played some Dread, which was
We did do Dread,
a
that's
GeneSys version, which GM Mike was running. That was a pretty cool session. And I've got a bit of a hankering for running Mephidius's Star Trek.
You keep talking about it.
I know. I had a big conversation last night with this group of people, and there's 7 of them, and they all want to play, and I'm going, I don't like playing games with more than 5 players. It's just like...
Yeah, but Star Trek seems like a setting you could get away with it. But
True.
The issue is, like we had with L5R sometimes, is that you end up with people spread out all over the place.
Yeah. And we've also done some L5R as well. But predominantly my time's been spent doing stuff for FFG, which is the reason why my friends have been without as much gaming as they'd like.
Why you're getting a lot of dirty looks.
Yeah, pretty much.
Not in the good way either.
So no. But anyway, so that's taken up a lot of my time. But that's coming to a close very shortly, until they give me another project. Please send me another project soon. So yes. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Cool. Nice. Speaking of other cool things, we got over the Christmas break? Some RPG journals from our friend Veronica.
Yes.
Of Silverwing Armory.
Indeed. Very cool.
Yeah, she shipped us a copy each of the journals. All the way from Canada, which is pretty cool.
It's not that far.
No,
For you.
Some people.
No, they are absolutely beautiful. I want to get another one for Chase so that we can have matching ones when we play D&D now.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out. They're small enough so that you could probably use an entire one for a campaign and not have leftover pages. So if you're kind of like me, I hate to if I'm playing in different campaigns, I hate to have 2 or 3 campaigns in one book.
Yep.
Having it all one book's cool because you can put it on your shelf and you can write on the front what campaign that was for, and then in the future, when you're flicking back through your RPG journal, you can see what's going on. You could say it acts like a journel.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Wow.
What I really like about it is that you have the option of choosing between dotted and lined pages, which gives you a bit of flexibility. I like the dotted because you can draw in it and stuff.
Dotted's good. Maps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's worth pointing out too, she has a heap of cool designs, which she's the creator of. I picked a cool one, which has like a big Kraken, curling over the front cover.
Yep.
What did you get, Martin?
I got a pilot flight log with the rebel symbols on it and stuff.
So it sort of looks like the flight log an X-Wing pilot would keep
Exactly.
under his seat of his cockpit, which is cool.
That's cool. I got the one that you got because I'm just very unoriginal.
Now you got Kaitlin's.
Oh, did I get
Yeah,
Caitlin's?
yeah, you got the same as me because we have really good taste.
Ah, that's right. Very good. Very good. So, but yeah, she's got a couple of really cool things there just on her website, which is silverwingarmory.com. So if you are looking for any sort of gaming and geeking supplies, check it out.
From a small independent artist. And they're very reasonably priced too. I think about they're $10 or something like that each, which is nothing because we spend a lot of money on everything in RPG, so why not a little bit more?
And Veronica's lovely. She's absolute legend, and she's fallen in love with the podcast, and
well, so she should have.
Well, and
she
we're
hadn't,
fallen
I'd
in
be
love with all
disappointed.
of her stuff, which is cool. So definitely go out and check it out.
The symbiotic relationship.
Yes, thank you so much, Veronica. Like I know she mentioned she wrote these little notes for us inside the books as well, and she mentioned that she's relatively new to the RPG world as well and playing these games. So I was really grateful to have a fellow person out there who understands what it's like. And yeah, I just absolutely love the book. I would highly recommend anyone to go and check that out. And thank you so much, Veronica, for sending those through to us.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you. So silverwingarmory.com is where you need to go. Talking about cross promotion, let's talk about our podcast of the week. Kaitlin.
Sure. So this week's podcast is the D20 Radio's Knights of Ren podcast, which is a show dedicated to Destiny's collectible card game from Fantasy Flight Games. Their first episode for 2019 has just dropped, where they talk about regional tournament top decks, meta, and a whole lot more. This is a really cool podcast that gives great tips on playing the game, along with the sort of banter that you've come to know and love from D20 Radio. You can listen to this podcast and many more by visiting www.d20radio.com.
Are they still playing Destiny?
I played Destiny last night with Chase.
Really?
Yeah, I love it still.
It's good.
Yeah. I mean, it is a cool game. It's just another collectible card game that I'd have to get into. So I sort of like took a step back, and
I've taken a big step back.
Well, all of my cards are about to be obsolete. So
They are absolutely.
Oh, really?
that's already happened. Yeah.
Tournament-wise,
as I mentioned before, one of the most amazing benefits of living with Chase is that he has everything.
But yeah, so very good. So yeah, check those out. Well, guys, should we get into our topic of this week's episode?
You mean core of the show?
Well, yes, I do.
I mean, we don't have to if you don't want to.
We probably should, though.
Let's get very emotional about this.
Well, should we?
Yeah.
I don't
Okay,
know.
fine. Let's do it. All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. I'm in.
Core of the show. And welcome to Core of the Show, the segment where we take a deep dive into a topic concerning the GeneSys Role Playing Game and, of course, gaming in general. Now, for this episode, we've got a pretty fun-filled, interesting one for you all to start us off for 2019. So, Kaitlin, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So it's fair to say that we are all geeks. And as geeks, we're passionate about our favorite fandoms. Let that be from the cinematic universes, novels, gaming, or in some cases, a blend of all the above. Another fair observation to make is that as role players, we will try to always find a way to bring those favorite fandoms into the form of RPGs, so we can live and breathe them in the fictional universes we all love so much.
Fortunately, though, thanks to this golden era of RPGs we now live in, many of those favourite fandoms have their own RPG lines, making it oh so easy for us gamers to dip our toes into their worlds. Let it be Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, A Song of Fire and Ice, Ice and Fire, and the other obscure but no less loved ones such as The Expanse, Infinity, and Conan.
But there will always be fandoms where there isn't a dedicated RPG line, and sometimes even when there is one, us fussy gamers will look to our own preferred gaming systems to transplant them into. And this brings us to the crux of the show, where we'll each be picking one of our favourite fandoms and talking about how we could bring it into GeneSys.
Now, before we dive too deep in, it's worth mentioning that we're not going to be getting into too much crunch. We've had that with the last few sort of episodes. So when we're talking about, we're going to talk about sort of like less about precise archetype creation, feats, equipment, and stuff like that, but rather paint some nice broad strokes on how we're going to implement our fandom into the GeneSys role-playing game. Now, if you're new to GeneSys, then we'd strongly recommend backtracking a few episodes where we discuss many of the upcoming points in greater detail. So, let's do it. The big question. What is one of your favourite fandoms that you'd love to bring into GeneSys? I know that this question comes up quite often about people going, how do we bring in this particular setting, or somebody's got a love for another system that they want to drag in.
I'm pretty sure that would have been the first question that everyone would have asked as soon as they found out what GeneSys was going to be.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like, oh, it's a completely generic system. All right, what are we going to make it with? That was like, I remember when it very first came out, all the Facebook posts of everyone asking what they would love to see in GeneSys.
Oh, I know that we did that on the podcast itself. We was like, oh, what are we going to do about Shadowrun, and what are we going to do about do Indiana Jones or whatever else? There's a whole host of sort of settings and systems that I mean, we love GeneSys and we love the narrative dice system. So if we could pick our favourite setting, what would we choose, Mike?
Well, one of my favourites is already done, thankfully, in the form of Star Wars. So I can't pick that because that would be cheating.
Yeah, pretty much.
And very easy to do because it's already written for me. But that's okay. But luckily, I like lots of things. And after binging Blade Runner, the first and second movie, not too long ago, I realised how much I really enjoyed that setting, and I can't help but shake the idea of how good it's going to be to play in that world. So I'm picking Blade Runner for this setting. Discussion tonight, anyway.
Cool. Martin?
I mean, I'd really love to pick like Mech Warrior, but
I crossed my mind.
But it's got its own system as well, and it's a bit more technical than we'd like to talk about today.
It's very niche too.
Yeah,
so
it's very
if
niche.
you're not up on the BattleTech lore, it might kind of be lost on you.
So what I would love to see in a game like this is Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, all full of stereotypes and
That'd be great.
witty one-liners.
But you could also bring in your magic as well, which you're a big fan of as well.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Cool. Caitlin, what about you?
I thought I would do something a little different. I can imagine everyone would probably expect me to be like Fifth Element,
that was
as
my
much
assumption.
as that is, I know, as much as that really is one of my most favorite fandoms and movies and places of all time, I actually would love to see Mass Effect, and I know that there has been some fans already who have made some of those ones, but just for my particular type of fandom and for today's discussion, I'm going to go with Mass Effect. I think it's a really cool thing of action, sci-fi, and just as well as magic, depending on how we want to do it. But I'm aware this is a podcast and you can't actually see me doing inverted commas with my hands as I'm talking. But just imagine in your head magic with inverted commas around it for anyone who knows what the Mass Effect universe is like.
Yep.
But we'll get into that a little later too.
And how about you, GM Hooly?
Well, look, I'm a bit of a Disney fanboy. So I can't choose Star Wars
Aladdin.
like you. No, not Aladdin. Jeez. No, it's actually Frozen. No, seriously.
Actually, that would be really cool.
That would be a bit of a cool setting.
Don't get me wrong, that'd be fun.
I think Aladdin would be really cool too, actually.
Yeah. Although I probably should just let it go.
How about Cars?
Anyway. How about Cars?
Yeah.
That'd be different.
That'd be interesting.
Or
Everyone's
you
playing
could do Wreck-It Ralph and combine all of them.
Oh,
like they
yeah,
did.
true.
Yeah, you
true.
get Star Wars in there. And
Yes, but for me, it's going to be Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh, that's a marvellous idea.
So I know that I've spoken about doing this, and I am in the midst of it, but unfortunately my FFG stuff has gone in the way. Yeah, Marvel superheroes is definitely what I would like to select. Can I lock it in?
Would it be Disney Marvel or Fox Marvel or Sony Marvel.
Oh,
This is very, very-
well. Okay, so
It's a multiverse.
If we want to go into that stage, we've got Sony Marvel that's now linked in,
Sort of, kind of, but not.
sort of, kind of, but not. Well, Spidey is.
Yeah, it's one part of it.
And, anyway, there we go. So I'm going to go the cinematic universe, which is the one from Disney.
Excellent. Cool.
Very
Great
cool.
show, guys. Let's wrap it up.
So if that's the only thing we've got to choose, it's a pretty
done.
short show.
All right.
So let's talk themes.
Yes. What usually makes someone fall in love with the fandom is its overall theme and how it plays off them. Dig deep and you'll find that the theme is often what makes you want to role play in a fandom setting, to live and experience the world that hits you right in the feels. So let's discuss our fandom's themes. Why do we think they'd be great for role playing, general role playing experience?
Yep.
And why would GeneSys be a good fit for that?
All right, Martin, tell us a little bit about the themes for your setting, which is Big Trouble in Little China.
Well, I just took a moment to have a quick look at what the internet or Wikipedia considers to be the themes of Big Trouble in Little China.
Right.
And it describes it as a fantasy martial arts comedy film.
That's gold.
And I think that's perfect,
Yep.
right? That really encapsulates what it is. So bringing in all of that would be great, but it's about having fun. The theme of this is about having fun because it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Oh, no.
It would be a very
Especially the acting.
Yeah. That's a part of the charm.
Yeah,
Exactly,
absolutely.
it is.
Absolutely.
It's totally B-rate.
But that would be a really unique, setting to play in, I think. I can't imagine, there's very few other settings that exist in any RPG line.
Yeah.
Which would match that very niche world of Big Trouble in Little China. It is so, even back in the 80s when it came out, it was bad, but deliberately so. And if you're someone who's never seen it before and watched it today, you might miss that movie. But if you're very aware that it's actually quite meta.
Because it's got kind of
It's aware of
elements.
itself.
It's aware of itself,
It's got elements of Cthulhu and it's got elements of Shadowrun and it's sort of, but it's all in that 80s sort of
Well, it's
montage sort of setting. And it's
It's heavily a martial arts film. With as you say, elements of magic and things deep within the earth, but also the people, long-lived people of power, fighting like gods, essentially fighting amongst themselves, and you're and you follow the protagonist of this chump. Just
there is
trying
no
to make
other
his way
word
in
for
that
Mr.
world.
Burton, is there really?
Yeah.
It's like-
So it's sort of like I imagine if you were role playing this and running a session of it, you would start it off as very almost mundane.
Oh yeah,
And all
that's key.
the players could be, mundane characters who are just suddenly thrust into this bizarre world of craziness. And I could be a great setting to play in.
And but
Theme-wise.
the thing is, the most important thing is when you're making a character for this, that you would have a very strong archetype, right? So it's not just our archetypes would match the sort of character archetype. I'm not sure if I'm making myself understood, but it's a very strong theme for your character.
You would almost have, we'll discuss the archetypes and careers, etc. later on, but you could almost have another layer of archetypes for this setting. Like you have your borderline racist, stereotypical archetypes, but you play that into the game, and so that is...
But it's self-aware.
It's self-aware, exactly. It's all meant to be that sort of comedy, but you'd have two archetypes, and you pick that sort of secondary archetype to layer over the top of whatever mechanically you end up playing.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it'd be fantastic.
Because it could do sort of, you could
It's
go
part of
some
the theme.
Yeah.
You could go to strange places, not just like Big Trouble in Little China. It might go Big Trouble in Little Italy.
Yeah.
And
Man,
and they're Greek gods. And they're Greek gods that you're basically dealing with.
Totally do stuff like that.
You know what you call the setting? Big Trouble in Little Worlds.
Yes. Or something like that, yeah.
And then you could keep those themes of Little China, but then transplant them around to different sort of as GM Hooly just said,
Yeah.
different sort of heritages and stuff like that. And
because like
so good.
you've got like Norse gods and whatever else,
Yep.
and the PCs are just stuck in the middle.
They're just men.
Of these. PCs are just people, and they're stuck in like with normal everyday jobs, and they're suddenly just thrust into this
larger than life
god battles and people sort of trying to ascend to some level of godhood and whatever else. Yeah, that would be an amazing setting.
Yeah.
Which really is how most good stories start anyway, when you think
That's
about
true.
it. Someone who's completely inordinary gets put in a completely... someone who's completely ordinary gets put in a completely inordinary situation.
True.
Yep. That'd be great.
True, but no. So there you go. Themes. That's awesome. Kaitlin, yours.
So I was thinking for Mass Effect, there's a couple of different themes that can be played on with Mass Effect, and it all depends on how you would want to play it. But the main one is basically, it is a bit of a combat heavy, but it's also almost like a quest. It has objectives that you need to get through. So it's going on an adventure, but it also is going on an adventure set in space. So you've got to think of, when it comes to themes, you're looking at sci-fi. You're looking at not only do they have magic in the form of bionics in terms of people being upgraded or people who are naturally attuned to using bionics, but then you've also got technology, because they also have the biotech that they can use. So you've got a combination of magic, technology, sci-fi, grand scale wars, but also small scale combat. You've got a lot of interaction between characters, because it's not just a go in, shoot, kind of take what you can off the dead bodies. It's about finding out and really going through adventures and really role-playing out through that way as well. So there's a few different themes that you can play on, but the big ones, like the really easy-hitting ones, I think, are those ones, which is, magic, or magic bionics, with the biotech as well, with the technology, and sci-fi battles.
I'd imagine as well, like, if you were to play it from the video games, relationships and character interactions could also be a very large, heavy element to it. Because I know the video games, that's a massive part of the video. And honestly, that's why one of the reasons why I love Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 so much is because of that character relations you get and storytelling.
But not Andromeda.
What's that?
Was that an expansion or something, was it?
We don't talk about Andromeda.
Andromeda was fine for the social interactions. It's just you couldn't tell from their faces what was going on, because they were so jacked up in the beginning.
Yeah, it's not great. Anyway.
We're just going to talk about Shepard at the very beginning. Let's just go talk Mass Effect 1 and 2.
Right. We're going back to it. Mass Effect does carry, as GM Kaitlin just said, it carries a lot of really cool themes. Like, I can imagine you could almost do a very fantasy-esque adventure. You got to stop the big, evil wizard, the big bad, doing some big bad scheme that's going to put everyone in turmoil, and you do that, but in a space opera fantasy skin. And Mass Effect will be great for that.
It's great. It's about choices as well.
Exactly.
It's about those moral choices that you have to make, and it presents you with unique situations of, is this right? And I think that's a very big theme.
Yes. And there's also, as you said, Kaitlin, there's a lot of scope to it. Like, you can do so much with it. You can have these big, grand space battles where the outcome can change the survival of a system, or you can do these small little conflicts where it's tight combats from cover to cover, then mix it up with some really great, interaction between characters. I think it'd be good. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, even in the game, if you think about it, they did a really nice combination of, even though you have your small-scale battles, they have a larger contribution and strategy to the larger war. So depending on the choices your characters make, can, even if you are only doing the cover-to-cover combat, can impact the war at large.
Yep.
It's a really cool way of looking at those types of things.
Yeah, I'm sold.
Interesting. Cool. As far as my setting goes, when it comes to the MCU, that's going to be highly dependent on what you want to do with it. But it is, at its core, it is the modern world, which has been somehow affected, where superhumans are coming into play. So as far as the theme, it's just modern day, but there are elements of magic. There's elements of obviously superpowered beings, and larger-than-life costumed superheroes. Effectively. But again, if you're going to go down the path of, Guardians of the Galaxy, you've got a sci-fi element there. If you're going down the path of, Doctor Strange, you're starting down the whole magic sort of mystical elements. If you're talking, Daredevil and Luke Cage and all of that, you're talking about street grade heroes. So it's not everything's this massive world shattering event like it tends to be in sort of the Avengers type films. It's more about what's happening locally. And what sort of things. So it's more of a microcosm rather than, this massive cosmos of places to go.
That's one of the things you first got to decide when running in this world is what magnification, what scale are you looking at the world with?
Yeah. Because if you go the big, large and life, cinematic Marvel scale, then you get some characters, as they progress and become more powerful and et cetera, having some pretty crazy abilities. And then you're telling a story then that's larger than life. Yep. But if you look at the Marvel films, all these characters who are very big, tough superheroes, they still are all very, very grounded in real world problems.
Yes.
So just because you can blow a building up with your eyes, I'm sure that's a power from some dude, eye man, something like that. You still, you can still piss off your girlfriend and she leaves you.
Yeah.
And you can still have those interpersonal conflicts in a very large scale setting, which is great. And that speaks volumes for the Marvel verse and how dynamic you can make it be for role playing, which is fantastic. But going by what Marn said, we pick a scale. You could deliberately start at a small scale.
Oh yeah. This would be my preference.
I would like to play at the smaller scale myself if I was playing in Marvel Cinematic. Yep. But there's no reason you couldn't escalate it out. The events unfold and things, start, falling into place. Next minute, little street crimes and problems and issues just magnify out and blow out to world threatening, or in the case of Thanos, universe threatening.
Yeah.
See, this is the best part, though, is that I like with the idea of running this sort of game is that, you start small.
Yep.
You start with you got little powers, you're just Spider-Man, a friendly neighborhood spider.
Spider-Man, exactly.
And you do all of these things, but as your characters gain in power, as they do at the table, they tend to get a little bit broken.
Yeah, sure.
But then the story escalates.
Exactly, because it's not always. I think that what you said, Mike, was probably correct. That it is about real superheroes with real world problems, and I think that's a key element to this setting, definitely.
Because the risk you run of superheroes, I think it's fair to say, is if you don't play it right or don't study it carefully, you run the risk of becoming inhuman because you're so powerful and grand. But it's important that if you're GMing this and even if you're playing this, to keep those real world emotional ties. Look at Thor.
That can be
and
a
Loki.
theme. But that can be a theme that you explore. Like in World of Darkness, they have the whole humanity issue. In this, the more inhuman you become, is it your code of honor that ties you to your your humanity, or do you just start making decisions for everyone and become Thanos?
Yeah, exactly. Start becoming the supervillain. It's like that fine line is where do you just go, what I'm saying, I guess it falls into that whole Anakin sort of thing, my way is the right way.
Because I'm the only one with the power to make this decision.
That's right.
Thanos.
Lawful evil.
Yeah, but Thanos. If we're keeping it in theme, definitely. Definitely Thanos.
But, it also you mentioned villains and whatnot, it also opens up the possibility for players to play in a campaign where they are actually the villains.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the Marvelverse, which could be interesting.
Which that would be fun.
I can sense the glee in your voice there.
Because I
don't know what you're talking about.
Because one of the other I guess it's a subsetting of Marvel, would be like to do an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
Where you are dealing with the ramifications of what superheroes are doing.
Normal people in a super world.
Yeah.
Well, that's one that sort of did start out super micro,
and it's
then
just
has
like
just
blown
ballooned.
out. Absolutely.
But
Through
people
character.
gain powers
Yep.
and change. Like, this is something that can
Notoriety
happen.
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
notoriety.
absolutely.
Well, look at the events of what happened in Civil War. Though ultimately the Avengers weren't defeated by any big bad villain, they were defeated by bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
And each other.
that's it.
It's true.
Conflict, emotional conflict, bureaucracy, and they just crumbled because of it.
And that's another thing with, I guess it's a superhero trope, is that the PCs have to end up, going head to head with each other at some point. So it's it's driving that conflict.
Well, now we know what's going to happen when you're around the table.
So yeah, but anyway,
I would like to play an X-Men one. To be
Oh,
honest.
yes.
That'd be cool.
Yes, please. So I can live my dream of being Rogue in real life.
so Mike,
My one, Blade Runner. Now, well, Blade Runner is, I think it's fair to say Blade Runner has sort of painted the idea of the cyberpunk setting. Sort of. Sure,
It's one of the earlier ones.
one of the early ones. It sort of set that sort of imagery in stone.
yep,
And one of the reasons it's funny, when I was a kid, I never really enjoyed Blade Runner. The themes were lost on me when I was young. But when I got older, in my 20s and beyond, the movies has grown on me more and more and more.
Yeah.
And to the point where it's now one of my favorite movies and universes. That's why I'm talking about it now. What I like about it the most is not only because it's sci-fi and cyberpunk, which are two things I love,
Yep.
it's very real still and very depressing. Everything in it there's no superheroes. There's no characters who are jacked up on cybernetics or bionics. Everyone in that world.
Hey!
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but this is why Blade Runner appeals to me, because they're real people. You can relate to everyone that's in Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Even the skin jobs who aren't supposed to be human. In a way, they're more human, and that is fantastic. And the Blade Runner has so much potential for scope. You can have your noir investigation type games. You can have your much more epic, broader stories similar to Blade Runner 2049, which I think that was definitely less noir than the first one, but told its own unique story, which is still very good. But in that world, there's so much morality play, and I love morality play in my RPGs, making players make tough decisions where they have to do something against what they want to do, and for their own better judgment, or vice versa. And that is great. I think Blade Runner has all the trappings to making a fantastic GeneSys RPG, because A, it's super narrative, and B, the GeneSys setting is super narrative. So the dice are made for it. I think it'd be really, really fun. And it wouldn't be hard to transplant everything for Blade Runner into GeneSys. Pick your generic sci-fi stuff and off you go. Because Blade Runner doesn't have too much in the way of, I feel, super unique things. Like everything about Blade Runner is just a gun's a gun. A computer's an old 80s vision of a computer.
yep,
There's nothing you have to spend hours reworking to make it work for GeneSys. And so that leaves you heaps of room for the GM to do a very heavy story.
yep.
And not get tied up with the crunchy bits and pieces of it.
In a way, it sort of makes it a fairly realistic future.
It does. And I've always thought Blade Runner, even though yes, we have flying cars and giant buildings and whatnot, but that's a future mankind could have quite easily gone down if some other things had altered in the
Yeah,
past.
but your average person doesn't have like all of these fancy technology things. Like
Your average person is a person in the dirt in that
they
in
look
that
just
world.
like us.
Exactly. And that's why I love it. It's grounded, it's real, and it's depressing. Fantastic.
How do you, just sort of as a side note, one of the things, because I'm a big fan of Blade Runner as well. Having read the novelization for Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which it's based on, it is a almost very different world to what Blade Runner sort of, to me, Blade Runner is very, very populated. In the Androids Do, the novel, it is very much a case of most people have abandoned Earth.
Well, if you watch Blade Runner,
Because-
if you pay close attention to Blade Runner, like watch it again, there's a lot of hints dropped through that movie that most of Los Angeles is abandoned. Only people left on Los Angeles.
In that one area.
No, the ones who just can't afford to leave the world.
True.
And that's
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's there's a few scenes in the first movie where they mention there's no housing problems because there's just abandoned sections of the city where no one lives anymore. People still live, but no citizens, you could say, live there anymore because they've all left off world.
Yep.
So I think the world is quite small. Like the population is quite shrunk.
Yep.
Compared to what it would be.
Compared to what it would be. Yeah.
Would have been, yeah. Like you look at Blade Runner 2049, the entire of Las Vegas is abandoned.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, there was a nuclear issue there, but there's been no effort to go back.
And try to clean it up or whatever.
Just
it's
left
just
in the
like
dirt, and everyone's just left behind and gone off planet.
because there hasn't been a need to sort of expand out because nobody's living there. So you've certainly got elements of isolation, of of devastation that should be played in, and neglect that is playing into those themes as well.
Yeah, as I said, depressing. It's great.
Very much so. Very much so. So we've talked about obviously we've named our settings. We've talked about theme. Let's talk about archetypes, career, skills, and talents. Martin.
Okay. Well, would our favourite fandoms run straight from the GeneSys core rulebook in regards to this, or would we need to get more creative and pull from other sources? I might like to pull some stuff from Terranoth for Big Trouble in Little China. There's also Star Wars or other material that's out there on the internet. Lots of people have contributed things. Or would we need to get creative and start building our own stuff from scratch?
Kaitlin, your setting.
Well, my setting's pretty easy to actually translate into a RPG style format because the game itself is an RPG style format.
Yeah.
So for Mass Effect, in terms of the archetypes, I'd probably look at that, basing that on the species that you have available to you. So you're going to be an Asari, or you're going to be a human. And then with those archetypes, based on how they are socially status within the world, would then depend on the skills that they have available to you. So I would look at humans and Asari being very high within society, so they'd probably have a little bit more of a higher presence than some of the other characters and other species that are available in the universes. So I would have that as the basis for my archetypes and move forward from that. And super lucky with Mass Effect is pretty much already there for you because Mass Effect itself is already an RPG format, just in video game. So I would just transport what has already been created with the universe into the GeneSys system using the rules that are there.
Yep.
For the careers, then I would look at the class powers that they have and the classes that they already have established. So you're looking at adepts, engineers, so the engineers that look after using the Omni tools and things like that for their tech mastery, infiltrator, sentinel, soldier, vanguard, which is basically a combination between being able to use biotics or being able to use the technology with the Omni tools, or being just straight badass shooting and being able to kill a lot of people and take some names while you're at it. So the combination of all those ones is there. So again, super easy. Take what you've currently got from that universe, using the same rules as GeneSys, and to create your own list of what the careers would be and what would best fit within those. And then again, skills, talents, it's all there. Mass Effect already has it. It's quite easy if you're going to have biotics. Some of the skills that you can have is the charge singularity, which is probably one of my most favorite ones that you could use. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. For the Omni tool, you could have a talent that's overload, which is one of the skills that if you are if you're an engineer, you can use when you're using your Omni tool. There's lots of different things that you can use from the game into the rule book as it is.
There's a beauty about pulling from an RPG that
I made it easy for myself.
Yeah.
Just copy and paste.
That's the strength of it. GeneSys, though, it's so simple to take something that exists and go, okay, how do I just transplant this over to GeneSys? Cool. I'll just assign this career, these skills. Off we go.
Yeah.
And it's pretty straightforward. And
it's really using your best guess as well. Like when you're talking about creating talents, I mean, you wouldn't have singularity be as even in the game, singularity, you have to level that up. So you could even already there, you've got the ranking that you can actually have in terms of being able to make your character more stronger. And it just depends on how you want to create the game itself without going too crazy at the beginning. And that's all addressed within GeneSys as well when it comes to their ranking of talents and skills.
Because you've got your basic talent, your improved, and then supreme talent. So that can easily link in with those sorts of things
which
as well.
is cool. Like you can do your biotics and other crazy powers with talents, or, as we'll discuss later, magic. And Mass Effect is the perfect guinea pig for playing around with that sort of flexibility that GeneSys allows.
Yeah, because I mean
Yes.
that is one thing that we probably didn't touch base on too much in our 2 Magic episodes. I know that we did discuss it slightly. Is that using the magic system, you can apply it across the board to other things like the biotech stuff, without it actually being magic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was playing. I had a I was in a game not too long ago, and I had a character who was an engineer, and he was a magic user, and he wasn't a magic user as such. He just had a really, really big toolkit, and he could almost build anything he wanted out of his toolkit, assisted by his robot friend, and that was his magic essentially. And everything I did, I narratively described as him, pulling out this contraption, bot helping him this way.
Was his name MacGyver by any chance?
It wasn't, but MacGyver wishes he was that good. This guy was MacGyver with tools.
Right.
That sounds amazing.
Very good.
That's the beauty about the GeneSys magic and how fluid it is.
Yeah, particularly though, even when you're looking at GeneSys and trying to put Mass Effect in there, I think you would also have to lean on the side of caution when it comes to making some of these abilities magic. I know, in my mind, it makes sense for a lot of those ones, particularly ones that you need to have to concentrate on, things that you have to maintain. Like if you're using Singularity, you're effectively creating a black hole right there in that little small space. That's something that should take some concentration, particularly if you're doing it at a supreme level. But then also you need to make sure you don't lose the feel of what Mass Effect is. Mass Effect, particularly if you're a biotic, it is not very hard for someone to lift a giant whole crate full of things and fling it at you with speed. That is part of the feel, and what makes Mass Effect so cool is that it's not so much of a struggle all the time. So you don't want to make it so much of a burden to try and add a lot of magic layers to it when you're doing an adept character, because they fling things at people and it's quite easy for them to do when they get a little higher. So just something to keep in mind as well. You want to try and keep the same feel and keep the same flow within the RPG game as it is within the RPG video game.
Yeah. I guess it's a case of you might want to have some sort of a chart or something like that allows you different ways to be spending advantages and triumphs and things like that to increase the time that something lasts. So instead of having to worry about concentrating on a spell-like effect, as you mentioned before, Kaitlin, you can have a system that uses things like advantages and triumphs instead to extend the time that an effect like that lasts.
Yeah.
Cool, but that's probably getting a little bit too much into the finer points of how it works, because we're kind of just taking a bit of a helicopter approach to looking at it. So as far as Marvel goes, archetypes, I've thought about this long and hard and I still can't come up with a decision. But my general feeling is that archetypes is more what your origin story is.
Yeah, origins.
That makes sense.
So, if you're a trained person, you would have these abilities. If you were someone who was a mutant, you would have these abilities. If you were an inhuman, you would have these, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, it is a case that your character's origin is basically what makes you you. Now, as I said, I've taken a long, hard look at this. And when I was doing my initial research for doing Marvel, I stumbled across in my collection of RPGs a book which was called, or a game which is called Icons, which is a very, very simplistic superhero setting, but came from the designer of Mutants and Masterminds. But it's really, really quite simple in its execution. And they basically have 6 archetypes or origins, which I think suits the GeneSys setting quite well. They have trained, transformed, birthright, gimmick, artificial, and unearthly. Now, for the Marvel setting, and for any superhero setting in reality, these fill that niche quite well, in my opinion. Like trained is basically your agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Transformed is like Spidey. Birthright is like mutants or Inhumans. Gimmicks, kind of like your Iron Man and your Hawk type characters. Artificial is obviously Vision. Unearthly is your Thor type as well. So obviously there are a lot of origin stories throughout Marvel, and the films show that. But in my opinion, these 6 fit the basic elements for what we're looking for, and everything else piles on top of that quite nicely. When we talk about careers, though, that's the one thing that's sort of a little bit confusing for me, as far as how do you bring in a career?
Well, yeah, no, okay. So
that's your real world.
Well, that's it. You've got your origin story.
Yep.
So it's where you've come from. It's your background.
Yep.
And then you've got your experience, your training.
Yep.
So you could have an origin story of enhanced, like Spider-Man, right?
Yep.
Something has happened to give you that power, but he's trained as a photographer.
Well, he's a student.
Or he's a student. Student works. Yeah, it works really well.
Well, you know what you could do? It could be crazy. Instead of just picking one origin, you have the choice of 3. You have to pick 3 origins, and they've got to layer on top of each other. So you have your mundane origin, your like early superhero turning point origin. Batman being bit by a spider.
No, he was bitten by a bat. Don't you know anything?
Oh, sorry. And Peter Parker being bitten in that transitional point, and then him getting his more full-fledged skills once he has adapted and learned. So you'd almost layer 3 templates.
So the way you do that then is your first one. Okay, so you could split. Okay, so this would be interesting. So what you'd do is you've got your stats that you get from your archetype. That's your baseline. What did you start as? Alien, human, whatever.
Yep.
Batman.
Then you've got your special. You've got your special archetype ability.
Yep.
And that's your. How did you get? What changed you?
Okay.
You know what was the spark?
Right.
And then you've got your career, which is your what happened next.
Yeah, okay. Cool way of doing it.
That's a good way of doing it.
But you could also have that shaped in when it comes to your career as what is it that they're also really good at that's not necessarily
they're mundane talents.
I have superpowers, because you've got a lot of their super abilities where they're like, oh yeah, I'm really good at flying, but then I'm also happen to be really smart, or something that makes them that gives them that human element. So it's not just how are you going to solve this problem?
Yeah.
I'm going to laser it with my eyes or something like that. They have that little extra flair that's more human.
Doctor Strange is a great example.
He's a surgeon.
He's a surgeon, but he
absolutely.
uses his brilliance that led to him being this great surgeon he uses that same brilliance and applies it to the study of these magical voodoo arts. I don't know. What's
the mystical.
The mystical arts.
Oh, yeah. Mystical arts. Yep.
Right, stop it. So in my headcanon, the way that I would like to do it, I think is you would have the archetype as your origin.
Yep.
Your career is basically how you survive in this modern world that you're thrown in towards. Now, if you wanted to go the whole Guardians of the Galaxy thing, fine. You can still have Thor is just a warrior, or he might be a knight, or whatever you want to call it. Then you will have your you might have your brute or your I don't know.
As Guardian is an archetype. That's his origin.
You could, absolutely. So there's all sorts of things. I mean, but you can do as far as talents and powers, because this is the one thing that a lot of people get hung up on. A couple of things. I think that I would definitely grab from Realms of Terranoth, which is a heroic ability. And I think that you wouldn't necessarily be limited to just one. It would be dependent. It would be part of your point buy for your archetype. You would then have some of you can have magic or whatever else, and I've talked about this in the podcast before, is that I would start to make the instead of having the skills, the magic skills, where you can use X number of different spell actions, I would actually have each one of those spell actions be its own skill. And therefore, what you do, and this is what my suggestion was, is that because there's 6 of them, that's your Infinity Stones. And you would call each one of those actions or skills an Infinity Stone name. So you'd have like power and reality and time and whatever else, and they actually do kind of marry up.
Yeah.
You might have one issue with the time one, but yeah.
It's similar to Mage, the Ascension, where they had different spheres.
Yep.
And yeah, I digress.
Yes. But as far as skills go, that would just be the way that I would look at it. That would be just be modern setting. Unless you were playing Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever else, in which case you might throw in some more sci-fi elements. But for the most part, you would just have your stock standard modern skills.
Well, you see, that sort of works really cool for someone like Iron Man, right? So his heroic ability is something to do with creation, right? So he can create things on the fly and they stick around. So it's when his suit gets wrecked, he, turns the helmet into a communication device. Because he creates something new from what he has.
He does need a superpower, so that's fair.
Well, it's not a superpower, but it is. It represents his ingeniousness. Yeah.
But see, this is where the tone of your
ingenuity. That's the word.
Ingenuity. There you go. So, but that's where your tone for superheroes comes in. Because, each PC would have 2 heroic attributes. And so Tony Stark would have it obviously as intellect. So when, that player is rolling for Tony's check, he might have, he's got greater chance of rolling triumphs multiple times because it then becomes open-ended. So I'd be definitely using that. I think that he'd have signature weapon or signature, you could always call it a weapon, signature armor. And you might have to design a few different sort of heroic abilities to marry that.
This is what I was getting at. He wouldn't have signature armor. He'd have the creation ability. Because say he gets locked in the cave with nothing but, they're telling him to make weapons. And so he decides, I'm going to make a suit of armor.
True.
So he rolls the dice and he gets this once per session. So he rolls the dice and he makes a suit of armor, breaks out and goes out into the world. The suit of armor sticks around as a thing that he's created. And then he starts adding to it every session. He creates a new gadget to go into it. But that can break with the spares and things like that and disappear. So he creates his own powers as he goes along. And so it gets very creative for the player and for the character to build these things.
The last thing that I would probably consider as well when in talking about powers in particular is to do certain, let's call them power stunts. You would use talents to do power stunts. Is what that's what I'd sort of like look towards.
So like Spider-Man shooting particular types of webs and things like that?
Yeah. You'd sort of like give a power use ensnare. For example, or spend 2 strain to give this attack using power ability or whatever else. Yeah, that's kind of what I'd be looking at.
That'd be cool.
There's lots you can do.
There is lots.
We will get lost in that.
We will. There's
no right or wrong way, I don't think. It's whatever you, as the GM making this world, decides to do.
Yep.
And if it works, it works.
Yeah, exactly. So
well, even then, it could be something fun as well that you get the players that you're actually going to play the game with on the creation of something like this. I mean, everyone knows what they love most about a Marvel or a superhero universe, so having their input and how that's going to work will probably make it a lot easier when you're actually playing the game because you've created how that's going to work together versus coming to the table going, okay, here's how you're going to be superheroes.
Yep.
Yeah. I would like to do if I was doing a superhero game, Marvel or not, I would like to do a life path system. And depending on the choices you pick along your life path system, it develops who your character was and their backstory. And
Ooh, I love that.
It develops their origin. And depending on your choices, it gets you certain points in different sides of a superhero. Like you have Tony Stark, who's your more mortal superhero. His superpower is his intelligence.
Yep.
So that reflects in different ways as he goes down his life path. Then you have your Thor, which is probably a complete polar opposite to Tony Stark.
Yep.
And his path down his life path, his chosen route, gives him access to these other abilities and points to spend or something like that. That will determine what powers he has access to.
So part of character generation, it almost becomes you're building your origin story.
Yeah, and that's I really got a strong appreciation for that system from doing the Infinity RPG,
Yep.
which has the path system.
Yeah.
And your choices ultimately land who your end character is. And I love to do that. I think you could do that with GeneSys in a superhero setting really, really well. You require a bit of work though. You have to sit down and develop the system.
Yeah, but it's just like the 20 questions in L5R.
Yeah, 20 questions is a perfect example as well.
You could do that up easily for this.
Yep.
For
Just sit
superheroes,
down
right?
and make people answer those questions and put some pen to paper.
And just like 20 questions in L5R, it really helps you develop your character. You go from no idea who your character is going to be until you finish 20 questions, like, okay, I know exactly who my character is. And then when you jump into your first session, you immediately know who your superhero is going to be.
Yep.
In this example.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
So, Little Trouble in Big China.
Yes, well, I mean, if it's only little trouble, then we may as well go home. Like,
But it's Big China.
yeah, the police have got this. But no. So it's actually a very easy one to look at because it's just your basic, like your careers are just going to be normal. Like they're just the standard careers in the book. Your weapons are just guns and knives and all of that. What really makes the setting is that sort of fantasy element that comes in. But also, because it's a comedy, it is that self-awareness of your of you as a parody. So I would like to see the archetypes in this be specifically things like the chump or the action hero or the martial artist or the damsel.
Yep.
Right. Yep.
The comedic relief.
The comedic relief.
That'll be your bard.
Yes, absolutely. These sorts of things.
Remind me when we get to the next, there's an upcoming part of this discussion called Quirks. Remind me to tell you of an idea I had.
Okay.
For that.
Cool.
But it's basically the archetype cements your role in the narrative. Right. So if you're the comedy relief, that sort of shapes who your character is right from the get-go, because you're making this selection to be someone who's not really going to be great at fighting.
No.
Right.
Or if he is, it's by luck. Or you could choose to be someone who's very serious at the table, and you could be like Egg Shen, the sorcerer, or something like that, and he's the mysterious, the knowledgeable old man.
Yes.
It could be an archetype.
So it'd be very much your stereotypes. Very much.
It's exactly your stereotypes that you would see when you're breaking down the movie Big Trouble in Little China. Like if you're doing a literary review of this, these are your archetypes.
Yeah. You'd have like the kid.
The kid, yes, is a great one.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to write them up, because the beauty about playing in a human setting, everyone's already human. So it's a matter of just establishing the archetypes, or in this case, stereotypes of those humans.
Change the word archetype to stereotype, and we've got it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Cool.
But yeah, your careers are just simple.
They could be whatever.
Truck driver.
Yeah.
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 Truck driver or sorcerer.
Or sorcerer. But that's what's so cool about this. It fits.
Yeah.
Then there's, your skills. They're just going to be your standard skills. But you will have the inclusion of magic and things like that.
Yep.
And your talents, I reckon you can just pull them straight from the base book.
Yeah.
Maybe with a mix of Terranoth a little bit, because you're going to have magic. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Well,
Oh, alchemy.
Yes,
alchemy is
alchemy,
definitely in.
Yeah.
because you're so like, this game is already so silly and over the top. You're not too worried about characters being OP.
No.
So what you do is you go,
The more OP, the better.
Exactly.
This is great. This is larger than life.
That's why you say to your players, hey, go get the general talent book that has all the talents that ever came in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Give them free form to that as well.
Okay.
So the players can do silly things, but that's going to be part of the fun.
But no, see, I wouldn't start them off with this, right? I would start you off as your basic, like, you can just choose from the base book.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
And then as things progress through the story and you know, Eggshen says, here, you know, drink this. It'll, you know, suddenly you can start spending XP on better things.
True.
You know, like,
you also chuck signature items and abilities in there too.
yeah.
Like if you're the truck driver, your signature ability is your truck.
Or it's snark.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that movie.
But no, I like
bad, but
I
it's
like
so
the
good.
idea of play unlocking better talents and things to spend XP on. I like that, like, because it's not just like your progression in tier. Like, things open up as the story opens up, and you start to see that there's this greater world out there.
Yep.
Your minds are open to more possibilities. I like
I
it.
like it. That's very cool. Excellent.
I want to play it.
I do, because it's silly and it's freeform and it's just get in there and have fun.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And there needs to be, you get a story point for one-liners.
Yeah.
That's all
Well,
I'm saying.
that brings back to my idea that I've got.
Oh, really?
I'm saving it up.
Yeah,
So everyone steals it.
All right.
Friendship's over.
So should we basically, before we get on to quirks?
No.
Blade Runner.
Oh,
I thought-
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm cutting him out now.
I'm GM
Sorry.
Hooly. I love Blade Runner. Sure you do. Wow.
Wow.
Okay. No,
Michael.
I would like to discuss Blade Runner, please.
Sure, go ahead.
Now that we've got that out of the way.
Right. Yeah.
Well, first up, archetypes.
Yes.
Everyone's more or less human, so it's pretty straightforward. However, I would love to include non-humans, the skinheads and etc.
Androids. Yep.
In as playable characters as well. Now, depending on the series that you pick, you have all your different Nexus models and stuff like that, which can bring different cool abilities and quirks as well. So you could really go simple when creating the Blade Runner setting, just have everyone as basic human archetypes, or you can expand it out and have all the Nexus 8s, 9s, etc., and all below, and you have your military models, and go bananas. You can go ham with it. And if you're writing that up, again, due to the beauty and ease of GeneSys, you just grab a pre-existing archetype, tweak it a little tiny bit, add a new ability, or etc. Off you go. Easy to do. And yeah, it's very broad what you can do with it. Careers, probably run them straight from the core book. Or what I would like to do, I would like to do a little bit more freeform, allow players to pick their skills that their career has and allow them to basically build their career. Career in my idea of a Blade Runner setting would be just a name. You could be a Blade Runner and be excellent at social skills and computer hacking skills, or you could be a Blade Runner and be a great combat warrior. It's up to you, basically, how you use your title. Again, that's something that you wouldn't want to introduce to a lot of some RPG groups, because it does open to abuse.
Would you do it as a complete freeform, pick all of your skills?
I would like to freeform.
Well, I think that you should have 3 that are core to whatever individual career it is, and then the rest are picked.
Yeah, that works too.
Because it's like if you went to university or whatever, you went through some sort of training to be a Blade Runner. These are the core things that they teach you. The rest are electives.
Yeah, that's true.
Electives that you pick up. And that's just one suggestion.
That's it. Well, no, GM Mixed Dread setting, he has something similar to that with his careers. The different types of street judges, have a pool of 12 skills, and from those you can pick up to 8 to be career skills.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of both. It allows you a bit of freeform choice. At the same time, it does put a bit of a hard limit on what you can and can't take. So it does minimize the abuse.
Yeah.
But that comes down to the people you're playing with.
Well,
as I
that's
said.
it too. Yeah.
If you're comfortable with your group of players and you know they're going to build a character that's fairly to character, they're probably going to pick the skills that are necessary for it. I can't imagine a Blade Runner is going to pick no investigation skills because
No, that's right.
why are you playing a Blade Runner? But yeah, as you said, your idea as well, Jim Flano is fine as well. It's great.
Yeah.
Skills, straight from the book. Probably the sci-fi setting or the modern setting.
Yep.
I can't think of too much. Knowledge skills might change a little tiny bit to better suit the world, but that's a given in most settings. You change the knowledge skills to fit. I can't think of anything too unique. Everything sort of fits. I'd probably remove alchemy, chuck something else in there. Surgery would be really good to that sort of
differentiate between medicine and surgery. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Like you have Blade Runner, the first one. You have maybe not surgery. Science,
Cybernetics.
science.
Oh, okay.
So you have
Science would be good.
science more than surgery because you have education, but science is like your more focused element of it, which would be really good as well. And science is a large part of the Blade Runner verse, which would be interesting. Talents. I'll start from the core rulebook and pick and choose from other sources or make my own. I don't think I don't think Blade Runner has really a need for too many crazy talents.
Not really.
Be interesting to see what's going to happen with the upcoming book.
Yes.
That, obviously we have been involved in the playtesting of that, but
Shadow of the Beanstalk.
it's there are certainly there's some things to look forward to.
Yes.
I think if you were running a Blade Runner-esque type campaign, absolutely.
I did forget we could talk about that now. So yeah, I would basically say get Shadow of the Beanstalk, and Shadow of the Beanstalk is much higher sci-fi than Blade Runner.
Yeah, true.
But does share a lot of the same themes. So you could get Shadow of the Beanstalk, trim it down a little tiny bit, prune it, make it a bit more grimdark.
Yep.
Then you've got Blade Runner. Works very, very easily. But you have to wait till March or something ridiculous like that to get that book. In time for my birthday, though. Just saying.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I'm going to get him. I don't know. Yeah, socks.
Yeah. I need some socks. Then I'll put some soap in it and then beat you with it.
Not a roll of coins or something.
No.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Jeez. That were dark.
That's a waste of money, man.
I mean, you get it back afterwards.
That's
it's
true.
just blood money then.
That's very true.
Oh.
You don't believe.
Wow.
Anyway, this part of the discussion is pretty straightforward for Blade Runner.
Yep.
It's very down to earth. It doesn't need supernatural stuff, super ability stuff. It doesn't need quirky, hilarious stuff from that Martin's topic does. And yeah.
Big Trouble in Little China's comedy and lighthearted, whereas you said yours is depressing.
Bleak and depressing.
And that you've got to keep that in mind.
That's it. That's
True.
it.
True. I think that, but for both settings, the equipment list wouldn't necessarily be monstrously large, I don't think.
Well, that brings us to gear, I believe.
Yeah, it's a nice segue, isn't it? Yes.
I mean, segways aren't really a thing for Big Trouble in Little China. I don't want to see people running around on those.
No, that is true.
Although
you could.
Imagine the Grand Sorcerer, and his only way of getting around is on a Segway.
That would be pretty impressive.
That's happening
I'm
now.
not gonna lie.
And he always enters a new scene, and it pans across of him riding a Segway.
He zooms up.
He's really good at the Segways too, verbally and physically. It's whoa, it's a Segway man.
Oh dear. So for equipment, let's talk Marvel for a moment then. Equipment is going to be on the very more simpler side, I think, because...
I think that's quite ambitious for you to say.
Oh, you reckon?
Yeah.
Why?
I think it depends on what Marvel verse you tap into.
Well, see, okay, so if we talk about... if we talk about Black Panther, for example, okay, I think that there would be smaller amounts of equipment, but a lot more attachments, if that makes sense. So there would be a lot more...
just more high quality gear?
Yeah, but I think that it's also more a case of talents that can be used with equipment to enhance it and give it special abilities and things like that.
It certainly isn't a focal point though of the setting. That's for sure.
No,
so
not at all.
you probably could get away with just the basic stuff and just fancy it up.
Yeah,
and make it more prevalent when it needs to be prevalent.
Yep.
I guess.
Yeah. So you just have attachments as an sort of centering on that,
no,
and
that
then
would work.
talents to enhance those sorts of things. So you're
Because in Wakanda, they've got all of the what's the name of the metal?
I do not know.
vibranium.
Vibranium. So if you've got a shield, you add a vibranium attachment.
That's right.
You've got a shield.
That's right. You're exactly right. So it's still a shield.
Yeah.
But it's got a special quality attached to it.
Yeah.
And things like that.
How about Captain America shield?
Actually,
That is what he's talking about.
it wouldn't be an attachment. It would be in Terranoth. They've got the
item qualities.
Item
Yeah.
qualities.
Yeah.
Well, not qualities. No, in Terranoth, you've got material construction.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
they've
Yep,
got
yep.
elven steel or whatever it is, and stuff like that. It'd be just like that.
That'd be great for that, actually. The templates.
Templates, yeah.
Yeah. And so I know that Chris Witt also did the same sort of thing for his Harry Potter setting, where he gave the wands a particular
wood
whatever it's
and-
made from.
yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. So that to me is probably something more important than actual like lists and lists of equipment.
No, you just
know,
keep the basic stuff and add a couple of extra things to make it unique.
And plus, for most superheroes, their item, their weapon,
Are
is
themselves.
going themselves or their signature equipment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're not going to be. You don't often see, a regular superhero. I use the word regular, but yeah, superhero picking up a gun from a bad guy. They never touch it.
Yeah. that's
Excuse
right.
me, Punisher?
Yeah, that's true.
Right. That's probably going to the extreme, but sure. But it's
that
cool.
brings down the question: is he a superhero?
He is...
If you say he is, then guess what?
no.
Bruce Wayne is too, buddy, and I win this
Hold
argument.
on. He is an anti-hero.
Oh, so he's not a superhero.
He's not a
Not a
superhero.
superhero. Okay, good.
Punisher's not a superhero.
You know who's not a superhero either? Tony
go on.
Stark.
This is going to go on for a while, isn't it? All right. So basically, as far as I'm concerned, until you were dealing with Guardians of the Galaxy type sort of stuff, that's where you would have its own source book. For the cosmic source book or something like that, you would bring in things like Shatari weapons, your any sort of weapon that Rocket uses and stuff like that.
But you still cover that of a template.
Oh, you could.
An assault rifle with
Give it an energy weapon template.
Yeah.
What's the species you just said? I don't know stuff.
Shatari.
Shatari?
Shatori.
Shatori.
Yes.
A Shatori energy weapon quality.
Yep.
And does X, Y, Z.
Yep.
And you just plug that onto any gun that already exists in Genesis. Off you go.
Yep.
Done. Job's done. You don't have to sit down and
Saves
create
so
that
much
armor.
time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or if you are fortunate enough to have a library of Star Wars books sitting on your shelf,
Yeah.
then that is prime real estate for Guardians of the Galaxy because it's a very, very similar sci-fi universe, those two.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to want rocket boots. They exist in Star Wars in several books. So
Yep.
straight from there, off you go.
Yep.
Absolutely. Blade Runner's equipment.
Blade Runner's equipment. Well, I think for Blade Runner, again, because it is very, very grounded, you could do most of the equipment straight from the modern or sci-fi armory of the GeneSys rulebook.
Yep.
Or hunt around online for fan-made resources because there's a lot out there. So again, guns and whatnot aren't a massive part of Blade Runner. Like you really only ever see in the films pistols. It's not a big part of the story. So I don't think you need a vast weapon equipment list unless you wanted to make it a more integral part of your story you're running. But I would just pull straight from the GeneSys rulebook and say buy modern or sci-fi guns from there, or fan stuff.
What about vehicles and stuff like that? Because vehicles do play a big part.
Yes, vehicles. I was going to get to that. Vehicles, I would probably, because I like to cheat on and make my life easier, I would just pull straight from Star Wars for a lot of the air speeders and stuff like that, or wait until a future book is released and use stuff from there.
Because there are there's a lot of differences between Star Wars vehicles and Genesis vehicles.
Correct.
But
the little
the
it's very easy
baseline,
to go to across.
it is still very easy to rip across. Just keep those in mind when you do that.
Absolutely. But again, unless the Blade Runner setting you're setting up is very, very heavy on vehicles. The most vehicles you're going to need is some like flying cars and ground vehicles.
Yeah, which is super easy.
And they're all fairly mundane. The flying, the air cars used in 2049 is a really good example of how tough they are. Kay crashes his in the junkyard and it takes a beating and it still just gets up and flies perfectly fine afterwards.
Yep. Yep.
So clearly they are fairly tough vehicles. And Kay's car even has automatic weapons. So it is something you have to consider when you're making your own vehicles for Blade Runner. Having a look at keeping things subtle, I guess. I guess vehicles are subtle like the story. They're not in your face about how tough they are and what weapons they brandish, but they pack the punch when they need to pack that punch.
Yeah.
And they also add that flair as well, having all the different attachments that they have, and can really differentiate between one vehicle to another vehicle when you're traveling, just based on what additions you can have to it.
Absolutely, which would be great.
I mean, having said that, and this is one thing that even with Star Wars, that because vehicles don't have that much in the way of stats anyway, like, let's face it, if you're running a chase off the top of your head, you only really need to know its handling, and, what its speed, what silhouette is half the time. I guess there aren't as many stats as, like, to know exactly what all the skills of an NPC are.
No, it's
it
pretty
is
easy
a case that, it's sort of, one speeder is another speeder is another speeder,
I see vehicles sort of similar to horses. They don't matter stat-wise until they matter.
Yes.
Yeah.
The vehicle does a thing until you need to make what it does integral to the story.
Yeah.
In that case, then you need to start tracking values and numbers, and etc. But speaking of equipment, it's easy to lean heavily into guns and vehicles and whatnot.
Yeah.
But Blade Runner, what it lacks in, firearms and brutal stuff, it has a lot of cool analog digital technology.
Yeah.
Like that whole 80s themed chunky computers with the glowing green and black and white screens and they click and clack and clunk and they're slow, beastly machines, but they're quite powerful.
Yep.
Like you see in 2049 K using the DNA database registry tracker, and it's this machine that takes up an entire room.
Yeah.
But it's still very powerful in the knowledge that it can provide.
Yeah.
So it's a weird mix of, for Blade Runner, all your equipment would have to be large and chunky, but still very, very high quality.
Yeah.
So stuff will do things, but there is no small little PDAs that we have today that like an iPad is.
Yeah.
The PDA is a big chunky thing that you carry around, in a pouch on your belt or something like that. And that's very Star Warsy as well. It shares a lot of similarities to that. Very high tech but low tech at the same time, which I personally love. I think that VHS analog sci-fi sort of feel is my favorite. I can't get enough of that. It's one of the reasons why Blade Runner appeals to me so much. And again, that is more narrative than anything else.
Yeah.
A computer's a computer. But if you want to describe the computer to the players at the table, describe it in such a way that conveys how big and chunky this thing is.
Yeah. So your encumbrance of your equipment might be
absolutely.
greater.
That's actually a really good point. If you want it to matter, then jack the encumbrance up.
Yep.
And it's a matter of maybe just taking whatever exists in GeneSys as it is, or in the upcoming Shadow of the Beanstalk, saying you can have anything from here, but it's just 2 extra encumbrance.
Yep.
Make it a blanket rule.
Yeah.
And so that data
it's
pad,
chunky.
it's chunky. Yeah. You need power sources and all that sort of thing. So you could do, it's a simple thing to do. It's a blanket fix and off you go.
Oh, I just thought, we're talking about reloads, for example.
Yeah, I was thinking of that.
You could basically have to carry around batteries.
Went the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
The spares while using a computer. I need to plug it in.
Yep. And like a lot of the computers in Blade Runner, especially the first film, they're all like Deckard's in his office looking at the images on his computer, and he's like giving it voice commands.
Yeah, yeah.
And like that is a small thing, but players could use that in a very, very strong narrative sense as well. Like,
Yep.
saying that old enhance cliche.
Yeah.
Hands.
Enhance. rotate 20 degrees. Yeah,
Enhance?
Give me a hard copy right there. I love it.
There's one last thing too for
Yes.
Blade Runner equipment, which I almost skipped over, and I think this will appeal to GM Kaitlin, and that is replicants.
Cybernetics, yeah.
Well, not cybernetics, but replicants, the replicant animals and creatures and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
pets and stuff like that. Won't always be necessary, but hey, it'd be cool for a character to have a replicant owl sitting on his shoulder.
Always necessary.
Exactly. That might add anything to the story, but damn, it's great set
Oh,
dressing.
it should.
It should, but
yeah.
But players love options, and as a GM, present those options. Say, hey, you can have that snake curl around your neck, and it just sits there as dressing, but as a cool set piece you have on that character, and the player will adore that and latch onto it
Yeah.
if it's an option that's there.
It helps them describe things when they've got something to talk
Absolutely.
about.
Well, yeah, and it can also even add like boosts or setbacks depending on if you're in a social situation and you're trying to be intimidating. If you've got a person trying to convince you to do something and they've got a snake wrapped around their neck, you might be more inclined to listen to what they have to say. I mean, I'd want to know what that person's going on, what's going on in their life to get them to where they are. You know, that kind of thing.
Well, like on that same sort of thing, like that's some great NPC fodder for the GM.
Yeah.
You get led into this underworld crime lord's den, and sitting at his feet are two replicant Bengal tigers.
Yeah.
Like, you'd never get that sort of opportunity in many other cyberpunk settings unless it's a part of the lore. And fortunately, that's a part of the Blade Runner's lore, that these fake pets are all the rage in some circles. So these two tigers are a great way to paint an image of how this guy is like. And maybe he's had them enhanced in such a way that they're actually saber-toothed.
That would be cool.
So, what you can do.
Very cool. Kaitlin, let's talk your equipment.
Oh, well, we could be here for a long time if we're going to talk equipment for Mass Effect, because they've got, just to your individual, like your main character, you carry around with you at all times assault rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, pistols, grenades. Even in the later games, you can have melee weapons like Asari swords and all that kind of stuff. So there is a lot in terms of weapons, and even within those each individual weapons, you have your different level of quality that you have for them. It's huge. I would also err on the side of, using what's already created within the GeneSys system and as well as within the Star Wars system to try and marry them over as best I could. But I would also not try. If it was me and I'm like, let's play, I wouldn't sit down and I would convert every single assault rifle or every single shotgun maker and manufacturer and different version just to try and create a complete index of everything that's created there. I mean, if someone wants to go do that,
I'll do it.
Go for it. No problem. I know that it would be like your favorite pastime, but for me, I'd want to get in and get stuck into playing. Yeah. So I would want to try and use as much as what's already available to try to marry that over into GeneSys. But there is a lot, and the Mass Effect universe is extremely expanded, and there is a lot of detail and information down to what different ranking each damage for each each level of quality an assault rifle has. So it would be really easy to actually transport that over into GeneSys within the system and the rules that they have there. So in terms of weapons, you have got so much to play with. Same with armor. You've got a lot to play with armor and the different types and different levels which each make and manufacturer actually provides with their armor. You don't see too much in terms of, like, in Mass Effect you have the one car, you got the one vehicle, so you'd probably, in the same thing as what Michael was saying with his setting, you wouldn't spend so much time in creating a whole bunch of different types of vehicles that you have until you actually need to. You might have upgrades to the one type of vehicle that you have, and that would be the extent of it. What I think would be the most interesting in terms of how you would put over into the GeneSys system is your Omni tool, because your Omni tool is your metagel. So when you need healing, you heal by by using your Omni tool. You can repair things. You can shield up or drain other people's shields if you're using that. You could do a whole bunch. You can even use your Omni tool as your melee, even as a weapon. I don't have an answer for how you would put that over, other than awesome tool. But that's a huge element of Mass Effect that I think is probably one of the most major pieces of equipment.
With that Omni tool, what you could almost do is the player builds their own Omni tool preset. So you give them an Omni tool, like it's the Omni tool core, and it has, say, 6 slots. And they into that slot, they plug in 6 separate Omni tool items. And they can, as a incidental action, they can just summon one of those. I use the term summon one of those weapons from the tool or items from the tool as they need it. So, I need my sword. I summon my Omni tool blade as an incidental just before I punch them in combat. And that's exactly how it works in the video game. You don't carry that sword around until you press the attack button. Then your sword appears.
Yeah, and it just comes out.
Exactly.
And they even have, like, even your Omni tools have different manufacturers and makes and models and things like that as well. And they all have different levels of quality, or, like they go up in ranking about how good they are if you want to buy them, particularly if you go into the later parts of the games as well. That would be a really cool way of doing it. Particularly, you could actually shape it as you can in the game to focus more on what your archetype character is. So if you were going full down the way of like tech master with the engineer, then you want to go real tech heavy in terms of the attachments you have to your Omni tool. You would even have like as a standard, everyone is able to put Metagel within their Omni tool, just as a standard. Every Omni tool can do that kind of thing. Be a good way of doing it. Or Metagel, sorry, I should say. Metagel. Is it Metagel or Omnigel?
I think it's Omnigel.
Am I getting my? I feel like I'm getting my my fandoms confused, or if not, they're both the same thing. Either way,
it all works.
Makes you feel good. Yeah.
Right.
You know what you could do to embrace that sort of video game feel as well? I would drop encumbrance altogether and just give your character weapon slots. Just like the game, you can carry 2 primary and 1 pistol.
No. What you do is you get yourself a bit of graph paper and you tell every person that they've got a 10 by 10 graph, and each weapon has a certain number
It's not the video game, though, Martin.
But the video game does have an encumbrance, particularly when you get into the later versions of it. It does have like weighting. You might not necessarily, particularly when they get into like you have heavy pistols and heavy assault rifles in, I think, Mass Effect 2. Is it Mass Effect 2 or is it Mass Effect? Ye shall not be named.
2 and I think it was 3. 2 and 3 introduced that, I believe.
2 and 3 had them, but they also had weight in it. They had an encumbrance, but I personally, I would maybe have a little bit of a combination of both, but I wouldn't want to get it too bogged down with, I can't have my heavy pistol because I've got this other thing on my back, because you are a one-person army at the rate that the character is decked out in the RPG, so you want to keep that same feel.
Well, you could just say that you can only have 1 large gun, 1 pistol, and something else.
Yeah, something like that without going too heavy into
basically
this is how much this weighs kind of thing, because I don't know about you guys, but I probably should if I'm going to be a really good RPG player, but I'm not, so I barely pay any attention to encumbrance. I know I should, but I don't. So I wouldn't want to have that as part of the key elements of the game. But as well, it would be interesting if lots of the weapons that you have, or the weapons you can have upgrades to it with talents that you're very familiar with, like quick draw and things like that. Like there's a lot of weapons that have that. Like how quickly does Shepard change between a sniper to an assault rifle? Pretty quick.
Very quick.
Yeah.
You'd also introduce, so I know the Mass Effect 3, or all of them actually been really big on it, actually. Different ammo types. You have your cryo ammo, your inferno ammo, and stuff like that. That could be a big part of creating a normal mundane weapon, do so much more with that one basic gun.
I love ammo types.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
I think as well with that, you could almost have that as the ammo attachment to it without actually having to buy separate, because you don't buy separate clips. It's just if any weapon overheats. So having that as things to really customize your weapon to be your own, I think that's my main thing. I really like being able to have a basic thing and customizing it to be completely unique for the character that you have, or the archetype that you have, or what story you're trying to tell. So having something like that would be really cool.
I'm down for that.
Yeah.
Very good.
Hey, wait, one more idea.
Yes.
For the equipment and vehicles.
Yes.
What's a big element of Mass Effect that's been in 1, 2, and 3? The Normandy.
Yeah.
So
that's your car. So you have the one vehicle that you have.
Exactly. But what happens if instead of it being a ship that's fully started out like a ship, you can follow the homestead rules, very similar to from the Star Wars line, and create a self-sustaining community. that you go back to when up between missions and stuff like that. Because you look at the Normandy, there's always something to do on that ship. You never just go to the Normandy and go to the next mission. You go talk to other characters. You go scan planets and stuff like that. So that could also be a very large theme to your Mass Effect game.
Well, I do really like how Mass Effect and some of the other games that I have got a real strong attachment to, like Knights of the Old Republic or Star Wars Knights of the Republic, where the ship itself actually becomes a character.
Exactly.
Like we're talking Firefly level of involvement when it comes to the ship and the attachment that you have. So I actually think that's a really, really cool way of just going, rather than just having a ship and customizing it, you have it. Because then you also have your land vehicle as well. Yeah. Like that's just something minor, but you can really make it all fit in really nicely the way Mass Effect actually does in the game itself.
It makes it your home essentially.
Yep.
You can have fish that you never feed and die,
and collect model ships from all around the galaxy.
Yeah, true.
If that's me, that's what you're going to have for me as a GM. Is like 6 sessions in. So who fed the fish? No one. They're all dead.
And
how do you feel?
Don't forget, you need the loading screen elevator.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yep.
And then you get shopkeep bonuses if you give them promotion.
Yes.
I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite store on the Citadel. 25% discount.
Right.
I want to play Mass Effect again now.
I know, me too.
So, Martin, your settings, Big Trouble Little China, equipment for you.
It's pretty boring. It's
got to have a truck in there, at least.
Well, vehicles are it's a modern setting.
Yeah.
Right, true.
It's like super modern. Like it's just, you've got your Uzis and you've got your trucks and your cars and things like that. There's no like spaceships or anything.
But you do have like over-the-top samurai swords and stuff like
yeah,
that.
you do. You've got all of that sort of stuff. So it does have that fantasy element. So there is, melee weapons from the past and antique sort of things. But there would also be magic weapons and things like that. They don't really have much of a direct impact because it's more about their set dressing.
Yeah.
So they're not like it's not like a +1 sword, but it's this mystical sword that's been around for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
It's called the +1 sword.
Okay.
If you had a character who was who had like geek archetype or career or whatever else, it'd be a case of I'm pulling out the mighty +1 sword.
It's spelled plus W-A-N.
Glasses.
+1.
+1.
+1. Oh, no.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be something that, yes, yeah, you're right.
You must use the +1 sword.
Right.
Oh, my God.
That is so bad. I love it.
Yes, that's great. That's great.
Pretty much the slogan for this RPG game for Big is like, so bad, I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so apart from, the occasional MacGuffin and things like that are mystical or magical, there's no real statistical difference between them.
If people are getting hung up on the weapons in this game, they're missing the point of that setting.
Yeah,
the only thing that I would spend more time on is the alchemy. I would come up with some ideas of what these things do.
Like mystical elements that you have to track down to make these certain potions or to run this certain ritual or whatever
the
else.
black blood of the earth and things like that.
Yeah.
And make it give some ideas to the players as to what they can do with alchemy. But it is going to be that freeform thing where if you want it to do something, it can. You've just got to work with the storyteller.
So I think it's fair to say that in your setting, Martin, quirks are going to be bigger than equipment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
it's a very quirky set.
I have one for you. I'm going to throw it at you right now.
Okay.
That instead of story points, you have slapstick points.
Oh.
Okay.
You have more of them. They don't do as strong a thing as story points do, but they're more frequent. And players generate them more easily. And the villains generate them more easily too. So there's this constant ebb and flow of slapstick happening in the game. And they can be used to do quirky, hilarious things that just build to the silliness of the story that's going on. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but it sort of adds to it.
No, you can have something like the GM gets to spend 3 of the slapstick points, if you want to call it that, and they get to monologue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they can't be attacked. They can't be attacked until the monologue's finished.
Yeah, everyone suffers 3. Everyone suffers 3 strain in the process.
See, look, I probably
That's actually
wouldn't.
really cool.
It is.
That's almost
it
like a
is.
talent in itself.
I wouldn't call them slapstick points, but I would call them like comedic points or something like
Yeah.
that.
Just had to be different, didn't it?
Well, no, just
Comedic relief.
I don't think that it's really a slapstick
No,
comedy,
you're right.
but it is definitely comedy. So these points of comedy that you can throw around would be great. You know, being able to monologue. Someone comes up with a really cool one-liner during the fight, they get a point to spend on something.
And as well, what you do, if the players say something hilarious in game, you reward them comedy points.
Or if they do something that's hilarious or is really dramatic even.
Yeah.
Like, because it doesn't just have to be like it doesn't just have to be comedy, but it could be something that is really important to the narrative. You're wanting to reward them because this is the type of play that you want.
Yep.
But they should probably spend these as part of that action that has generated it. Yeah,
Well,
possibly.
Look, I'm with you. Further to that, I think that you should get a point knowing what this movie is like that it's based on for overacting.
Yeah.
Yes.
There has to be points for overacting.
Every monologue scene a player has, everyone at the table votes to see. Everyone has like
It turns into that game.
Yeah. Everyone at the table has like a coin with a white side and a black side. And after the players had a big like scene rant, everyone reveals their vote. And if it's got the majority, they earn comedy points.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
If
good.
they don't, they lose comedy points and the villains get it instead.
See, the cool thing about
that's
this
cool.
is that it should be spent to pretty quickly. Like it should be a back and forth. It shouldn't be people are just hoarding comedy points for this, but it should go to that player. I think so. And then you know how in GeneSys we get this sort of player-driven narrative. I think that yes, the ebb and flow in this should be more focused on players making plot changing decisions and like
and the GM doing
and the
crazy
GM
ones
doing
too.
the same things back and it's like this like
You know what you do to stop that from
because it's completely you never know where this is going to go in the next 5 minutes.
Well, you know what you could do as well to make sure those points are being spent really quickly all the time, back and forwards. You have you set up an automatic timer somewhere at the table. Every 5 minutes it goes off, and whoever's the most unspent comedy points, something bad happens to them. And
The most unspent. I love
unspent. So they have everyone at the table frantically trying to spend their points all the time. And because same applies to the GM too.
Yeah, the GM could get the bad thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Like,
I like that. That'd be fun.
Side note completely, that film, if nothing else, has the best example of a player spending a destiny point, a story point at the start of the session, right? With some innocuous comment where they've just gone, when the bottle basically flies off and it's like, I spent a destiny point to catch it. Okay, cool. And it's just like, it just must be great reflexes. And then at the end of the film, when it gets used because he has this thing thrown at him and he just catches the knife and then throws it back and kills the big bad.
Yeah.
spoilers. Come on.
Spoilers.
Wow.
If you haven't seen it, there's
You're gonna
something
be-
seriously
You're
wrong
going
with
to be
you.
in big trouble, buddy.
Oh, no. Luckily, I'm not a little chummy. Yes. So, but anyway, sorry. Side note.
No, but yeah, stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
it all adds to the story. I can't help but feel though that it might have trouble with more than a few sessions at a time, in one story.
Yeah.
Although I would love to see more with Jack Burton. Like,
Wouldn't we all?
but you could string it into a few stories with characters coming and going, or
You'd run a very episodic, I think. You wouldn't have a massively linked campaign. You would have like one
just
adventure
crazy
followed by
stuff.
another
Yeah.
adventure.
yeah.
That's sort of like what I would like to call a pickup game. That
It
if
would
you've
be a
just
great
got
pickup game.
Yeah, if you've got a couple of people together and your normal session can't run, it's just the sort of thing that you'd pick up and just have fun with it.
Yeah.
Because there's no big overarching deep sort of story to it. It's
Wait.
just, it can be, but
I have an idea that feeds directly off that, Ian.
right.
the GM at the start of this pickup game session for Big Trouble in Little China, right? He has a deck of cards, right? And he draws the cards out, and the cards determine, in the order they lay, the plot of the adventure.
Oh, I love that.
That's
That would be
cool.
so much fun.
That's kind
So
of
the
cool.
GM has to like wing it on the fly and build the story into that adventure, and the players know what's going to happen, but then the roller coaster of the
Of
ride.
how you get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
They know what, but not how.
Because you flip over the back cover of an old 80s movie, and
Yeah.
you know the story
You know
inside
the
out.
beats.
You know the beats, but you're not there for the story. You're there for what happens in the story.
Yeah.
So that's a similar sort of concept here.
But yeah, I like the idea of this being the sort of game where the GM's along for the ride as well.
Exactly.
Because it's
Yeah.
you wouldn't create the same sort of vibe for a game if it was all plotted out so much. Like it would be taking itself too seriously.
It's got to be crazy and over the top and absurd, unexpected things happening.
Yeah.
Because that'll add to it. You know, it'd be great as well.
What?
The players or something like that, by some event, can spend their comedy points to change the card of the story.
Plot twist.
Plot twist. So the GM will be like,
Oh dear. Because I just think like that your first card should be the overall plot of what the bad guys are trying to do.
Yeah.
Because we've already established that the main setting theme is that it's the players just messing with something of what these big godlike creatures are doing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
They're just caught up in this.
they seem to get stuck in the middle. And suddenly, yes,
Yep.
very cool.
Because of some green-eyed girl.
So cool.
well, how about Mass Effect's quirks?
Yes, Mass Effect's quirks.
Well, it's very closely linked with its themes, I would say.
True.
Like you've got your biotics, which is a really heavy part of it. Like that's a little bit different. The fact that you can have create a singularity right in the little space there. But I think as well when it comes to not only just the things that you can do, but just the experiences and stories that you have, like being able to jump from a ship and visit planets far, like jump from one planet to another planet and going on adventures and developing relationships with the other people, like your crew that you have on the ship. I probably would say it would be its own little quirk in itself, similar to what we see in like Firefly.
Yep.
Well, even just the idea of the ship itself being a homestead is a quirk in itself.
Yeah, the relationships and the homestead sort of home feeling.
'Cause
that is a great quirk.
You're creating a system there in order to manage, that home base of sorts.
Absolutely. And it's your home that can travel, as you were saying just before, Caitlin. It's a home that can travel the stars almost instantaneously with no effort. There's no risk in traveling from point A to point B, so the story can easily shift backdrop in a heartbeat without having to make your astrogation check or anything like that. Because in Mass Effect, technology is so advanced,
It just happens.
it just happens. It only goes bad if there's a big villain involved. That's the only time space travel mucks up.
Because it's certainly
But it also allows you to transport yourself into not only like different planets, but like even different settings. Like you could visit a planet that doesn't necessarily have the same technological advancement, and then you go sent back into a different type of world completely, or even further than that. Like as we saw with the Reapers as they came in, like something completely different from what the norm is. It can just take you into so many different places.
You could visit a lot of themes within that too. Like you could do your more grounded sci-fi. Then you could do a very, very heavy horror survival theme too. Like what happens if your ship is marooned somewhere and then, bad things happen.
Yep.
And that, you're right, that comes very much from the setting. It's directly related to that. But Mass Effect, because it's so broad, in itself is a quirk, I guess you could say, as well.
Yeah. Freedom.
Well,
freedom to create what you need and what you want.
The idea of technological magic,
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
science so advanced that it is indistinguishable from magic, is a very big
That's true.
quirk here.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Particularly when you're looking at your Omni tool and everything that it can do, mixed in with the biotics and the different species. Like I think as well, one of the quirks is that it's all these different species from different planets actually working together. most of the time, but there's a long history here that humans are only new to it. So that's a pretty interesting quirk, that they've all these other species that have bring a lot to the table, and we're new in that and trying to build, like humans are trying to build their place within that society that we've only just learned about. I think that's a little bit of a difference in what we've seen with other different settings.
The humans are seen as upstarts to a lot of from a perspective of a lot of the races. And it'll be interesting.
We are no longer top of the food chain.
That's right. And also there's another quirk as well, like in most sci-fi games, usually their emphasis is on the human story. But there's no reason why there has to be a single human related to your story in Mass Effect at all. You could be a Asari ship exploring
Asari Commando.
Space.
How wicked of a story would that be, going through the Asari histories and their relationships and what they have to go through? Like, we saw a little bit of that in Andromeda with the different types of like all of the different species and fighting and coming together. Yep. I think that would just be really cool to expand on that.
Wouldn't it be cool? You could do that before humans are even a part of the Mass Effect galaxy. Because humans have only been around.
That'd be interesting.
Yes, they've been 500 years. They've been around for some tiny amount of time like that in the spectrum compared to everyone else. So you could have the Asaris or whoever you want to play, and your story could bleed into them crossing paths with humans for the first time as they discover the Mass Effect drive.
Yeah.
So humans could be the aliens.
Yeah.
In a weird
that would be really cool. That would be an interesting setting.
That would work, yeah.
That's really
And that would also make it really easy for you to actually transport some of the high-level stuff that you see in the Mass Effect universe into something a bit more basic, because you're just going to go back in time a little bit. So it's not, you just start off really super, how are we actually going to figure out how we're going to live in the new world as we know it, which is multiple worlds.
Yeah. Be awesome. I'm sold.
Yeah.
Write us up. Get started. Let's play it.
All right.
Let's do it.
I'll get the codex.
Let's go.
We'll get it going.
So the quirks of Blade Runner.
Oh, Blade Runner. Morality. I think is his biggest one.
Yeah.
Questioning who's human, who's not human.
Yes.
And that is
what makes someone human.
Exactly. And I think Blade Runner, let's say both Blade Runner films are perfect examples of that morality.
I like the idea of the storyteller keeping it secret who's real and who's not. Like he decides at the start of the game that, and players don't even know.
Or maybe one player does know, and the player is trying to secretly subvert the story to the replicant's agenda or something like that. There's a lot you can do.
Because it's almost got that Battlestar Galactica kind of
it's a good
feel
example.
to it.
It does.
Where, who's the Cylons and who aren't. So, if you were to have characters, like that, and the GM would basically put them aside and say, okay, what are you? And they keep that to themselves. Let the PCs know.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of questioning yourself.
Yeah.
What, both ways work really well.
Or like the Battlestar Galactica board game. 90% of the time, someone is a Cylon. At least one person.
And they don't know it initially.
And they don't necessarily know it.
Yep.
So you could definitely introduce that quirk into your Blade Runner campaign very easily.
Speaking from experience as a character who has had that happen to them relatively,
yes,
it's really cool. It does make you question about the history that you've had with your character, and it can allow you to do something really different and unique with the story. So I would think that would actually be a really awesome thing to add as part of the quirks that not even the player might necessarily know. Of course, if you do change that, it's always good to have that kind of conversation out of session. But I still think it's just really cool. I'm sorry, I was about to swear then. I had to hold myself back going, just how cool I thought it was. I think it's really cool.
There's some really cool things that can come from this, right? So, for instance, the players could come to the wrong conclusion. And someone could believe that they're a replicant when they're not.
Right, yes.
Or everyone could turn out to be a replicant, the entire party. Or no one is a replicant.
There is certainly an element of paranoia.
Yes.
Which is in this sort of setting, who are replicants, who aren't. And especially when you're talking about Blade Runners, where they are hunting them and they're always finding new ways to blend themselves into society. That's brilliant. That's a great quirk.
That's great. It's one of the reasons why I love Blade Runner so much. And the addition of the new film, though, because it's advanced the storyline 30 years, it's made the new generation of replicants that were created by the Wallace Corporation. They're now allowed in society, but they're heavily regulated and heavily controlled.
Yep.
Spoilers, K is a Blade Runner, which you find, not Blade Runner, a replicant, which you find in the first 2 seconds of the film.
Yep.
So it's not really a spoiler. But you could play your story in that timeline where replicants are permitted to exist. And this is where I could get really interesting with the story. The whole party is replicants. They're Blade Runners or put into some sort of task that humans don't want to get their hands dirty with.
Right.
Yep.
They're given that task. They do atrocious, horrible things in that task, like Kay does. He doesn't like doing what he does, but he does it because he has to, because he believes himself to be an inferior person.
Yep.
And once he discovers he might be human, he starts to question everything. Suddenly he doesn't see himself as inferior, but he has to live this inferior life. And that's horrifying. And when he discovers that he is still a replicant, it crushes him. And
because that's an interesting point, is that it's quite often we come up with those series or, movies and whatever else where it's always the human asking themselves whether they're the replicant.
Yes.
Turning that on its head, it's the replicant saying, am I human? That's really unique.
it's great. And this is where you could, on a gameplay mechanical perspective, where dice are involved, you could have your replicant players do their baseline checks. And if they fail the baseline checks, and you can increase the difficulty depending on the horrible stuff they've witnessed and done in the story so far, you increase the
Skill
difficulty.
challenge.
The skill challenge, that's perfect. But that initial check could be a willpower check or discipline check or whatever you want it to be. And if they fail that, they've got 72 hours to get away before they're terminated. And the whole story then is flipped on its head. Or because they failed that baseline check.
Look,
Because everything they've done, they've started to question.
This is probably something completely out there, but could you imagine if you had a talent called realization that you get up to a point that you can choose to work out exactly what you are? So nobody knows, if we go by what we were talking about before, that the GM decides for you, and that's part of the buy-in with the game. But then as a tier 5 talent, you can basically go, I want to know exactly what I am. And then that player then gets to do whatever they want to do with that. It might give some special abilities and stuff like that, depending on what the GM has determined them to be.
It depends on
I'm just
It's
I think
interesting.
I'm spitballing.
it's good. I think it depends on the type of game that you
Exactly,
want to play.
Sure.
Because
Being able to buy the answer can cheapen the experience if it's a pivotal part of the story.
Because if I'm playing a game where that's not central to the story, yes, I would love to be able to buy it, and that maybe that opens up extra things that we can talk about what the character could do. But if it's central, like that questioning morality thing, then I would like, even if I know the answer, to still there be a question.
Yeah. As soon as you take, if you give that firm answer, it takes away the mystery. And as soon as you take that mystery away, you lose the appeal of the mystery. And you sort of go, okay.
Maybe.
No.
I don't know.
It's
It
interesting.
depends on the
thinking.
story that you're wanting to
It is.
tell.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it also comes to the setting as well. Like in 2049 setting, there's Kay's under no illusion that what he is.
That's right. And that sort of setting, then having a firm answer is sort of like it could be good.
Yeah. But in the first Blade Runner, Deckard still doesn't know if he's a replicant or not.
I mean, we know, but
We don't still know. Just fun fact for everyone here, Martin still has not seen Blade Runner 2049.
no, I have not.
Really?
Oh,
No,
That's I just realised I
That
spoiled
breaks
it
my
all for you
heart.
too.
because you guys all like saw it without me. Like,
Oh, sorry, Martin. But no, I mean another option. Just thinking out loud again, I guess, is that you have the ability to know what you are, to not know what you are, as options at the start, and both of them give some sort of mechanical benefit.
Yeah, I think it comes down.
You can do it a number of ways. So.
Me personally, I don't like tying that morality or that sort of heavy storytelling to a game mechanic because I find as soon as you do that, it sort of just devalues it. But I'm not saying it's it hasn't got merit. I think it just comes down to storytelling.
Yeah.
If you being a replicant or not isn't pivotal to the story, sure, make it a thing.
But if that is the central story that you're telling, then I think it needs to have that question and maybe no mechanics attached to it.
Yeah, exactly.
I just think the setting, it just seems to be something that that does play a central part in both films. So is that something that you want to represent? And I guess that may be an optional rule that you could throw in to say, if you do know what you are, you have these abilities. If you're a replicant, these abilities,
because
if you're human or something.
We were talking at the beginning whether, some players know, in that case, then I think that they should be given maybe something or extra that they can do to help drive that narrative if it aids with that storytelling.
Yeah, true.
But if they're a replicant and they know they're a replicant, then they know they're a replicant because they've got far more fabulous powers than an average human.
Yeah.
Like K and the replicants in 2049 are much stronger than a human.
Yeah.
And when...
So in the 2049, it makes sense to do this.
When you punch someone's spine to the back of their throat, which what happens in 2049, there's no question in your mind if you're a replicant or not, because you have the ability to do that.
Great scene.
Yes. Yeah, fair enough.
But so there's that. But what about...
the fact we're discussing that means there's lots of room to play
There
with.
is a lot of room to play with.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, you don't really have replicants in, Marvel.
Well, do
you? You've got Skrull.
You've got Vision.
Yeah?
Vision is
Vision's
an
basically
android.
Siri.
Yeah.
Hey, Siri.
Siri on steroids.
Well, I was sort of going with the idea of the Skrulls. Like, they hide amongst man. Like, they hide amongst all... because they can change shape.
Yep.
You don't know who's one and who's not.
Oh,
but they do have fantastical powers to back that up.
Well, you've got Skrulls, and then you've got Super Skrulls.
Yes.
So, for those that don't know, I'm sure everybody knows what a Skrull and a Super Skrull is. But for those who don't, do you know what a Super Skrull is, Michael?
Sounds like some sort of scream metal band.
Right. So basically the difference is Skrulls can just change to look like other people. Super Skrulls can take on other powers. So they can copy powers and stuff like that.
Captain Marvel a Skrull?
No. She is Oh, no.
You've forgotten.
I've forgotten. Isn't a Kree? That's a Kree.
Isn't Hawkeye a Skrull?
No.
Yeah,
Well,
We don't know.
we don't know.
He could be a super...
It could be. But yes. So talking about quirks for Marvel. So that was a nice segue. Really bad.
I believe it was a smooth segue.
It wasn't until I made it awkward.
No, it was really bad.
Oh, dear. My goodness. So, yeah. So, as far as quirks for Marvel, I've just been sitting here thinking about it.
There's not really any in there. It's pretty quirkless, isn't it?
Look, I think superpowers is pretty much going to be the biggest quirkiness to it.
You've already sort of mentioned it.
What do you mean? What would you I feel like I'm getting picked on.
I believe he's tooling you, sir.
No, because you sort of talked about what your quirk would be a little bit earlier, like splitting everything up into the Infinity Stones, and
yeah. So that I think to me would be the as far as like the quirkiness to the rules.
For the rules.
That to me would be the best one.
There's a lot of quirks.
Yeah,
and how you...
It depends on what sort of setting that you're going to have within the MCU.
The setting itself is kind of the quirk in a weird sort of way. Like if you slap on the Jessica Jones street level quirk, then your story immediately becomes a lot more human.
Yeah.
Well, more so. And that is it's a quirk setting. The line is blurred. What a morality question. A play here we have.
Well, see, we talk about sort of one-upmanship when it comes to that sort of stuff. You look at Iron Fist, and then all of a sudden it brings in a different, like, with, what's the name of the place? Cullen? You've brought in this additional mystical element thrown into it with all of these supers and
so sad. No one believes him that he really met a dragon.
No,
who was that?
This is Iron Fist.
Yeah, he did meet a canning though.
I was so sad. I'm so disappointed that Netflix has killed all of that. But anyway,
Okay, no, but that ending.
Yes.
Without saying
Punisher,
anything.
the season 2's
Yes.
for Punisher's coming out.
It's like in a
So they haven't
couple
got
of
rid of
weeks,
everything
isn't it?
just yet.
Something like that's true. So there's still another season of Jessica Jones as well.
Yes,
so we've
there
got
is.
Jess as well as yes.
Yeah,
Jess was
I'm
my favourite.
keen for Jessica Jones. Like,
I still need to see second season.
Really? It's
do
really
it.
good.
Yeah, it's good.
I still need to
good.
finish Pasha. I still need to finish Daredevil.
Oh,
You're
get out.
so-
The only one I finished is the first season, Jessica Jones. That's all I've done.
right. Michael isn't the biggest fan of Marvel.
Well, stop making shows that I fall asleep in.
You do that in
fell
DC
asleep
too.
You fell asleep at Aquaman,
Because it was
dude.
garbage.
Right. No, I didn't think so. But anyway,
I
moving
liked
on.
it.
No, it was all right. It was a good nap movie.
No, okay.
I nap endorse it.
Of all the DC movies, it was fun. It was a good movie.
Yes,
Like
yes.
I did not like Batman vs Superman or anything like that.
No one did, Martin.
But Aquaman, they're getting better. They are.
Let's not
Trial
talk,
and error.
Let's not talk Justice League.
I didn't say that they were. I didn't say that they were Marvel quality. I said they were getting better. They can still be trash and be getting better.
But you
This is
can't say DC
There's hope
movies.
for everyone yet. You can still be trash and get better.
You can't say
Yes.
DC movies are getting better because they really were better in the 3 Nolan Batman films that we had.
Yeah,
they
true.
can't go, well, we're going to get better eventually again. It's like, no, you
It's
just...
because they stopped doing their own thing and they started trying to copy other people.
and hiring terrible directors and screenplay writers.
Okay.
And
Moving along.
How every one of Ian's Marvel movies game sessions is going to end.
if it's every single session is going to turn into a DC versus Marvel
excuse me.
thing,
Hey,
this is
maybe it's a
Yes.
Marvel DC crossover universe.
this is possible and it's been done. So
No. Vomit.
Hey, no, if that happens, you can kill Batman.
this is true.
no one killed Batman. You know what? No one killed Batman.
Anyone can kill Batman.
Superman couldn't.
It's because he
dear.
said Martha.
Oh, just enough.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
moving along.
His kryptonite is apparently Martha.
Wow. Okay,
Fantastic.
Just for the record, though, seriously, I would like
Yes.
to name one time in the history of anything that nerds have ever argued over superhero movies.
There is no reality at all
No.
that,
Yeah,
that
this is
exists.
true.
So
That never
yes.
happens, so you don't need to worry
No,
about it.
that's right. So yes, but as far as quirks, there are a lot of them for any sort of superhero setting.
Well, the way I see quirks, put me wrong here for superhero movies, is if you look at the movies of the cinematic Marvel movies that have come out,
Yep.
each of those movies have come out with their own quirk.
Yes.
Guardians of the Galaxy, it's still, the setting is Marvel,
Yep.
but its quirk is it's set in space.
Yep.
Doctor Strange, its quirk is very mystical sorcery and magic.
Set in multiple dimensions.
Exactly. Ant-Man is much more Honey, I Met Your Kid slapstick comedy.
Super science.
Super
Sort of,
science, yeah. And then you have, what's another good example? Thor Ragnarok.
Yep.
Great film.
Awesome film. Larger than life and with a comedy element to
Yeah. True.
it, which some people love and some people hate. But, you know, everyone's entitled to their opinion no matter how wrong it is. Because Thor Ragnarok is amazing.
Yes, it is. I agree. 100%.
Yeah, good. Because if you didn't,
Taika Waititi, though, is one of the best
he is.
directors.
You know he's directing the final episode of The Mandalorian.
Yes,
I am
saw
aware.
that.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Yes.
That makes me happy.
Yeah.
But so's what are Bryce Reese Davies? Oh, what's her name? Howard.
You're just saying words now.
John Howard's daughter.
Okay.
Sounds.
Dallas Reese. Dallas Reese. I can't remember.
But she's doing one of the...
She's doing one of the episodes as well for
cool.
Mandalorian. But anyway, we digress. So
We do that a lot, though.
Yeah, we do. We have been. But yeah, definitely when it comes to any sort of quirk, it's going to be dependent on, for superheroes anyway, it depends on which part of the setting that you're going to focus your story on.
Yeah.
But overall, if we talk about rules, definitely the Infinity Stones, as far as I'm concerned, because they play such a massive part, certainly from phase 1, 2, and 3 anyway,
Yeah.
into the overall story.
Well, and it is
So-
a good way to divide things up. So
You need then each session though of the Marvel game.
What do you mean?
Well, at the end of every session, after players wrap up and start packing the gear up and whatnot, you go wait. There's an end credit scene,
Yes.
and then you GM like a
See,
3 minute scene.
so Cool. I love that idea.
But you don't do it all the time, or you do it all the time, and people still don't learn. They get up and leave the cinema still. They go, there was an end scene? It's like, yeah, like every other Marvel film. Have you not seen one before?
So you wait like 30 minutes at the end of the session, and some people will go, "Oh, I've got to go," and whatever. And so there'll just be 2 or 3 people still talking to you, and you go, "Right, open the laptop." Okay, so there is this.
But it paints a picture of a bigger plot point coming up.
Yeah, sure.
So it doesn't directly tie into the adventure you just played.
Yep.
It's you introduce an NPC, or something happens, blah blah blah, and the players that hang around, they get to find out.
Look, it is your typical cut scene that you would see in Star Wars, where the main heroes, they're not aware of what the Empire's doing, but you see that cut scene of Vader sort of talking to the Emperor and learning about Luke and stuff like that. But the PCs don't know that.
No.
So,
but the players can find out.
Yeah, but I mean, you get that throughout all of the Marvel films anyway, where, the big bad's, twirling his mustache and whatever else. But I love this idea with the post-credit scene. That's just amazing, and that is so happening.
You know what else you'll have to do is have an NPC that just randomly pops up as different characters in each one of the episodes that you have, and it's always going to be based after Stan Lee.
Yes, that was the biggest, saddest news that happened.
As the GM, as soon as the Stan Lee character NPC walks in to the scene, you go duck down behind your GM screen, then put on a pair of thick glasses and put back up, so everyone knows you're playing that
Stan
Lee
NPC character for that short period of time. Pop back down again, take the glasses off, and everything's back to normal.
Absolutely,
I think we've actually gone into people and then storytelling when it comes to how we're going to be talking later on in the episode.
This is true, and that's probably a good segue. There's another one.
Well, we're missing someone, aren't we?
Are we missing someone? No, we've done everyone.
We did everyone? Okay. I just didn't want you to cut anyone out like you did.
Wow.
I wasn't sure if we had or not, but I was just ready to be like, no, moving on. We're going to be talking about Blade Runner.
All right.
But yes, that's going to be a thing. I've fallen in love with that. That's got to happen. That's cool. Both of those things.
I would do it at the end of every story arc.
Yeah.
Right? Because then it's not happening every session.
No.
But sometimes. It's like you pick an important time to reveal something about the overarching plot.
That's right.
And you just drop it in there.
Yeah. And then, of course, you'll have the players who'll get used to that after a while.
And they start packing their bags slowly.
Yeah, slowly. And they'll be turning to other players going, do you reckon there's going to be a cutscene?
And you're just sitting there like...
Cinema. Always happens in the cinema where you've got somebody who'll go and they're like packing their stuff and they don't know whether to move. And because I've always done my research beforehand and I know that there's going to be a cutscene.
Yeah, but they can't do that.
Sorry?
They can't do that.
But I will always turn to that person and go, there's a cut to scene. You might as well stay. And they just relax.
I don't say anything. I like to watch them suffer. I get
the sort of person that just wants to see the world burn.
Yeah, it is. What's how Blade Runner started. No, I get a special joy when I see people walking from a Marvel film before the first end credits scene. Like, yes, you're going to miss stuff. And you know this. Have you not learned? And they walk out.
They still don't learn.
I know. It's so good because I know they're missing stuff.
Well, they don't care.
Doesn't matter. I still
why did they go to the movie in the first place?
I know.
They don't care. I don't get it.
Yeah. I still enjoy it.
All right, moving on.
That's probably the funnest part I have in those Marvel films. Yes, leave the cinema. I missed the scene.
So very quickly, just talking about the sort of people that you would have other than Stan Lee appearance, you would have to, I think, organisations play a big part in the overall scheme of things. So, Wakanda, SHIELD, Hydra, AIM.
Yes.
The Guardians themselves, the Nova Corps, all those organisations seem to play a big sort of thing with...
same with...
Stark Enterprises.
Stark Enterprises, yeah.
Same with...
LexCorp. Could somebody just shoot Michael now, please?
with Big Trouble in Little China, there's organisations as well. There's the Wing Kong and the Chang Sing.
Yep.
And it plays a big part of the movie. So, these people... which we're now talking about, are important to the setting.
Yep, absolutely. And, you've got to have your big bads and you've got to have your minor thing. And this is where GeneSys is amazing for that, because you have your minions, you have your rivals, and you have your nemesis. That's your typical any sort of Marvel film, if you've got the foot troops, they're always minions. You've got their lieutenants, and they're equal to the players or equal to the main character in the story. I'll use Winter Soldier, for example, when they attacked the boat at the start. That you've got all of the foot soldiers of Hydra. They are all minions, but then the main lead bad guy he's not a nemesis. He is clearly just a rival. He's a potent rival, but he goes toe to toe with Captain America. So he is a rival,
But there is varying degrees of nemesis in GeneSys. So you could have a lowly level nemesis.
Sure.
Then save your big nemesis for your big bad.
That is another episode again. But definitely. So.
Well, I know in speaking of people for Blade Runner, it's obviously interaction between PCs, NPCs, and etc. is massive part of Blade Runner. If you're not doing that mostly in Blade Runner, you're missing the theme of the game.
Yep.
So if you're running a Blade Runner game or something similar to it, you need rich characters. You need your players to connect and care. If they don't, then you're kind of running a fairly aimless game, I think, because what else is there to
Why
do?
are you playing Blade Runner?
Exactly. That interaction, you have there's so many cool. We'll talk about this before with replicants. There's so many cool moments you can have where you have two players or player and NPC who get along really, really well. One happens to find out they're a replicant. How does that change the dynamic between the two? Suddenly, one knows he's an inferior species, I guess, compared to the human, and his social class has been slammed down to nothing, just utility piece.
Especially if they've sort of like been hunting them.
Yeah.
If they're all Blade Runners.
Yeah, that's it.
If they've been hunting them and one player has shown complete, let's call it what it is, racism for one particular group of people, namely the androids.
He turns out to be one.
And he turns out to be one. How does that affect your psyche as a character?
Yeah. Well, you look at in the original Blade Runner film is a perfect example when Deckard discovers that Rachel's a replicant, and then Rachel shows up at his apartment, upset that she's a replicant, and she at first doesn't believe she's a replicant, and Deckard very cold-heartedly basically lays it down and says, yeah, you are one. And she starts to cry. You can see there's a moment where Deckard's character has realised that he's conflicted between, is she a person or not a person? Yeah. And he himself is upset because he's a Blade Runner, but his relationships with replicants is usually at the end of a gun. He never has this interpersonal connection with them. And suddenly he has, and he's seeing this grief that's on this person who has only just discovered that she's a replicant. Because let's not forget, most replicants know they're replicants. It's only the ones who have the memory implants don't know they're replicants until it's revealed to them. And poor Rachel, 12 hours ago, for her life, which is all about 10 minutes, she's thought she's been human.
Her life basically fell apart on screen.
Exactly. And that's a very, very powerful moment. And then there's the pretty hard to watch romance scene between those two characters. And I use romance fairly loosely. But people get upset by that scene, but it's supposed to be upsetting because it shows that Deckard, even though he's treating her like a human, he still doesn't treat her like a human.
No, he treats her like an object.
Exactly. And then he tells her to say, I love you. Then that leads to the question, does Rachel ever love him? Or is she just being told to love him? And then she's maintained that command for the rest of her life up until the events of 2049.
Yeah.
And that's heavy stuff. And you couldn't do that stuff in an RPG if you didn't have rich characters and people to play with.
Yeah, true.
That's a big part of it.
It would definitely be role-play intense.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So what about Mass Effect?
So when it comes to people, like it's it's not only just the people that you have on your crew that I would want to have, and I know we've spoken about it quite extensively, as well as having the ship be a part of that crew and have it be its own character. So I'm going to classify that as being part of like the people and storytelling as well. But Mass Effect is a space opera. It does have end of universe big bad coming through with the Reapers and the original ones, or well, it seems like someone's always wanting to take down the universe, and I don't understand why people are so keen on destroying the world or destroying the universe when you have to kind of like live there. But anyway, nonetheless,
I'm one of the fools that have to live here.
And they always come in threes too for some weird reason.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
But you always have these large organizations or these big bads that come through that is the main opposition of the story that you're looking at. And it doesn't always have, like, as much as that's the big theme and the big people, like the big thing of Mass Effect, you can have that on any scale. Like, you could be visiting a planet and whatever council or whatever government or whatever ruling body, that could be a big bad for that particular session. But the main ones as well is the council. You've got the council of all the different species that govern pretty much most of the civilized galaxy. Civilized, again, you can't see my air quotations, but it's there. I got to remember, this is a podcast. You can't see it. But then you've also got the different species and how they all interact with each other and the different hierarchies that they have within society, particularly like when you look at the difference between like Asaris to humans kind of thing.
Yep.
Then I keep on going for the Asaris for a different one. We need to go with something different.
Asaris are cool.
Asaris amazing. Like,
yeah.
They are. Yeah. I do love them, but there's lots of other species other than that. You've also got the Geth. Like the Geth have been introduced as well. Cool. Like that's a pretty big difference in terms of like the different like and how they interact with each other and how they get treated across the galaxy. It's so open. It's a Star Wars universe full of opportunity.
I think
in terms of storytelling and people.
I think one of the really cool things that comes from the people, and I think you've hit the head on it, is when you go to a planet.
Sorry, I just imagine grabbing someone's head and like hitting it on the bar.
Yeah, because I completely muffed that.
Which is a very different visual image to the term that you were trying to use.
No, but what I'm trying to say is that I think you've hit the nail on the head.
There you go.
There you go.
With that one, is
less violent in terms of what goes through my brain. But,
poor nail.
It works.
Unless you're a nail. Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
But
depending on what you're trying to actually nail, that's true.
But when you go to a planet and it's a different culture and they have different rules and different ways of interacting with each other, and because it is that space opera sort of thing, you have to deal with that and interact with them on their terms. So each planet has different people, different cultures. That's huge, in my opinion.
Well, could you imagine playing in a timeline where the humans have just been introduced to the galaxy and they're trying to find the way with the other races? Like,
I like the idea of doing it the other way round.
Oh, that'd be great too. Yeah,
is you being like the humans have just started coming out into the world and they're the big bads because nobody understands them or gets what they're doing, and you're the Asari or whatever.
Let's face it, who likes humans?
Yeah,
we're pretty horrible
accurate.
people.
We are pretty horrible. Yes.
And it's a getting to know you sort of a thing. Like you see humans as the aliens in this particular idea. I think it's cool.
And you also have for Mass Effect 2, and this ties very strongly to the themes of the video game, is the whole relationships between very personal relationships between people from different walks of life, like you have, and different species, and the whole you can have some great RPG moments, possibly with more, mature RPG groups where you have romances built between PCs and NPCs of different races, and seeing how two people from completely different sides of the galaxy, quite literally, get along. Like, could you imagine, bringing home your human boyfriend for the first time to meet your Krogan stepdad, or father-in-law, sorry. It could be kind of awkward. But that is some cool, interesting moments there. That's great role-play.
That's not going to go well.
No.
Well,
No.
Krogan father-in-law, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I don't see it going well.
Very true.
But yeah, it's huge. There's so many different things that you can do. It's really only limited by your imagination. And I know Mass Effect has got some of the foundations down with some of the species that you can do and choose and those types of things. But there's nothing to say that you can't create your own either. I mean, as much as they've explored most of the galaxy, there's still a lot more that you can discover.
Yeah.
And other galaxies.
Just while I remember, because I'm just going to go backtrack a little bit. When it comes to quirks and NPCs and sort of the characters that we're going to be experiencing in these settings, for the Marvel setting, one of the things that I sort of just while we're discussing these things, is the whole powers. Like in GeneSys, when you get a talent, it's normally a positive, right? But you rarely see any limitations to those things. What I mean by that is that with superpowers, for example, it's just like they have a weakness, and it's normally a mechanical weakness, which is something that most superhero RPGs have got.
Yep.
But GeneSys doesn't have that built in. Yes, there is some background, you've got strengths and weaknesses, but they really are sort of just more about your moralistic take on the way things are. But you might be able to get a power boost to something, but you have a limitation that has to be taken on top of that, whether it be a vulnerability to something or it be a dependent. And that's what actually made me think about the whole characters thing, is that the Aunt Mays of the world, the Pepper Potts, there are always the characters that are in these stories that don't have superpowers, but
we can't use Pepper Potts then.
Well, okay, yeah. Well, I try not to think about Iron Man 3. But,
She has superpowers now.
yes. Didn't you know that? She got hit with the what is it? The virus, extremis virus. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So, but I think they haven't mentioned that.
They've hand waved that so bad. Anyway, we digress.
But yeah, so there is that sort of quirk with that. So you've got weaknesses, and then you've always got the people who are left behind. That don't have those powers, because we're talking about real people that have suddenly been thrust into that superhero world because of their abilities. And who have they left behind? And that always plays a big part of the story. So creating those strong NPCs that aren't the bad guys is just as important to the whole of the story element as well. So...
how about Big Trouble in Little China? What sort of people and storytelling can you do with that?
We did sort of touch on that before. There's different factions. Like in the movie, you've got the Wing Kong and the Chang Sing. So they're sort of the it's sort of divided into good and evil there, right? And so that's the battle that's already going on in the background, and the players get caught up in this, and they have to pick a side. So wherever you go, whatever you do, there's going to be bystanders.
Yep.
But mostly because it is such a larger than life setting, the people in the background are going to be swept up in this as well. I don't think it's because it's a comedy. I don't think that it's there's no moralistic sort of look at all of this. There's no looking at the deep into the interactions between player character and NPC. It's they're set dropping.
Morality and
set dressing.
Set dressing, yes.
Morality and stuff like that isn't a big play.
It isn't a big play.
When you see a bus veer off a highway and crash into a suburban area, you're not meant to think twice about all the people that just got killed.
No, you're not.
It happens.
But if it does come into it, it's in a big, broad strokes.
Yes, exactly.
Good versus evil.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stark contrast.
Yep.
And the people reinforce that.
And that's
Because that's an overarching theme, I guess, isn't it? It's sort of like good versus evil.
Yep. And
Really?
it's black and white.
Yep.
that sort of brings it back to Blade Runner, and we're talking about the organizations and whatnot. It's worth mentioning that a big part of a Blade Runner campaign can be heavily tied to the organizations. You've got Tyrell, you've got Wallace, you've got the LAPD, and a myriad of other things as well that obviously you can create, because the Blade Runner universe is fairly open. It hasn't got a huge, massive sort of, in canon story that like Star Wars or Mass Effect has. It's a couple of movies. It's got some fiction here and there.
Computer game.
Yeah. But it's fairly open slather. You can create whatever you want and chuck it in there and it becomes real. I'm really looking forward to tying Wayland into it somehow because because both
that would really fit.
Yeah, both did share a universe at one point before the story sort of got
Really?
Yeah, there's Wayland's in. So you see the Wayland Corporation logo in the first Blade Runner,
Really?
and
Wow.
Yep,
Maybe they developed, like dimension hopping powers.
both can still
I know.
because the events of Alien occur in 2000 or some such.
Something like that, yeah.
So it's
I guess
200
it's
years
possible.
ahead of time. You look at the tech in Blade Runner. That is quite clearly the forerunner to the tech you see in Alien.
True.
That chunky, big stuff. And they both shared the same director for both the first films and the same, art coordination teams and things like that. So they're very close to
Having said that, 2019 is when it was set, and that's right now.
But
Where's my flying cars?
well, the thing I like about what they did with 2049, they didn't try and hand wave that. They've just gone, this is clearly a different parallel universe.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic storytelling because that could be easily mishandled if they try to make it
Try to retcon it type
retcon in
thing,
some
yeah.
way, shape, or form. I don't know how they could have done it and made sense, but films do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Yes. But for Blade Runner, your big evil corporation is the perfect backdrop for a story.
Yeah.
And they could be the guys pulling the strings behind some nefarious deeds. There's so much you can do with it because corporations are these big, especially in a cyberpunk dystopian future. Corporations are untouchable. They control everything, especially in 2049 with Wallace. Wallace is horribly evil compared to Tyrell, and you can do so many cool things with that as a storyteller and introduce cool characters and tell fantastic stories that ties in your very grounded personal story at the table with your replicants and humans and Blade Runners. But a great backdrop.
Any final thoughts on how do we set up these settings in the first place? Any thoughts on creating your own settings based on the fandom that our listeners are obviously wanting to build?
The best thing that I can say is just have fun with it.
Yep. I think Kaitlin struck it before. Don't try, if you want to run a setting or run a campaign of your favorite setting, don't try and create an entire source book.
No.
Most of the tools are there for you. Build what you need to build. Let players help you. You don't need to create every single rule written down.
Yeah, and you can create it as you go.
Create as you go.
Well, look, I think probably Star Wars is the best example of that, where they've given you the core rules and they've given you a few NPCs and some of the general setting, but the game has gone on for 5 years with releasing all of their source books and whatever else. So even they don't try to do it in one hit. Why should you? Just do what you need to do the bare bones, then work out what setting your players want to play in within that setting or the themes or whatever else, and then focus on that. And then you can go from there. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Absolutely. I think as well, from my perspective, when it comes to making rules and creating the setting or looking at how it's going to play, and I think of this whenever and I probably mentioned this 1,000 times, but think of the story and have more fun with the story and how it's going to keep the flavor of the universe that you love so much versus rules and being really tight on following those rules that is already placed. So as we've spoken about before, we've already talked about changing the way story points work because that fits with the setting that we want to create and it fits with the feel of what that setting is and why we love it so much. So don't be so, this is how it's written in the GeneSys core rulebook, this is how it has to be done. Feel free to make it ebb and flow with what it is you're wanting to achieve and what experiences you want your players to walk away from that table with. It's okay to change things just a little bit if that fits with the universe.
Absolutely. Perfect.
Yep.
Fun bit of trivia.
Yes.
For listeners out there, the 1998 film Soldier starring Kurt Russell
Right.
was, when it was written, meant to be the Blade Runner sequel.
Really?
Yep.
What?
Correct?
When it was written.
When it was written. But technically, technically, if you wanted to be a real canon Nazi about it, the only way they could tie it into Blade Runner when they finally produced the film was by having one of the Blade Runner cars in the junk on the junk world.
Wow.
Because it handled different things.
Correctly. So the Kurt Russell's character, the soldier, is meant to be either a replicant who's grown from a child into a super soldier, or that was changed in the late screenplay, and he started off as a child. But
there you
good trivia
go.
for you out there. So you could almost technically call Soldier a part of the Blade Runner universe, and in turn technically call Alien a part of the Blade Runner universe with Soldier and Predator, or sharing this weird universe.
See, the thing there, though...
Ooh, I love it.
That's cool.
The thing there, though, is you've got the synthetics or whatever it is in Alien, and then you've got replicants.
That's it. Well, you think about replicants are quite clearly, they're too questionable to keep producing because they're so human. So let's make them less human and people won't question it anymore.
Yeah.
There's some interesting things you could do storyline-wise, definitely, with that.
Then we speak about more weird interconnections.
Yep.
Alien has also appeared in the Judge Dredd universe.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, but it's dark comedy anyway.
Yeah.
So.
And it gets better.
Oh, yeah.
Alien and Terminator have also crossed over. Yep. And
Yes.
Judge Dredd and Batman have also crossed over. So everything,
this was coming.
Blade Runner and Batman exist in the same universe.
Wow. That's just a bit weird.
Depressing.
Right. Everything was going along swimmingly until you went down that path.
It's the multiverse theory.
It is the multiverse theory. So, yeah, do whatever you want with your setting, I guess.
Yeah.
So if you want to have superheroes in your Blade Runner setting, you go right ahead.
Hey, that could actually be cool.
Not if Batman's, if that's the same universe as Batman, you'll be all right.
Right.
No superheroes in that one.
I won't even start this argument because I don't want to make everyone cry.
Wow. Okay. Moving along. Well, I think that really that's a nice way to underline all of that.
That's a great segue to the end of the show.
Something like that. So
now I'm just imagining us all on segways, just going from one part to
with
the
billowing
other.
capes behind us
wow.
on segways.
That's segues.
with the +1 sword.
Wow. Well, look,
If there's anyone who is really good at fan art, they should totally do that.
Yes.
That should be our new logo. And just not explain it to any newcomers that come in.
And I want to wield the +1 sword.
+1.
We all should have +1 swords.
this is true. All right. Well, there it is. That's a healthy and passionate discussion, I think, that we've had about our fandoms and how we'd make them work in the GeneSys setting. We hope that this has somehow inspired you to bring the universes of your favourite fandoms to the table using the GeneSys role-playing game. Now, normally we would have behind the screens, but we have literally talked our heads off for almost, well and truly over 2.5 hours.
If you're still listening, Jesus.
We love you as well.
Well done.
Yes. So yeah, basically that's going to bring us to the end of a show. If you have any questions for our next episode when we do behind the screens, you can send us an email to info@thedicepoolpodcast.com or post your questions to Facebook and Twitter. And if you're lucky, we may read them on the show, or we may discuss them at length if you've given us a show topic. So, yeah, let us know.
And you can also visit us on our website, thedicepoolpodcast.com.
Also, make sure to like and follow the guys here from the Dice Pool Podcast on Facebook and Twitter by searching @DicePool
You can also find us on YouTube by searching @Diceball Podcast and on Discord via the D20 radio channel, and of course on iTunes and your favourite podcatcher. Also, if you're feeling generous, please take the time to give us a review on iTunes. It really does help us bump up the show in the queue. And of course, if you love social media, you can review us on Facebook as well.
Indeed. So, yeah, guys, great episode. Welcome back to 2019. Hopefully we've got some great things.
Oh, welcome back to 2019. What did I miss?
Yes, whoa! We've just spent too much time in Blade Runner.
Great Scott! Anyway, so welcome to 2019 to all of our listeners, and hopefully you'll continue to support us through the next year. We'll be discussing some great topics. We've obviously got Shadows of the Beanstalk, which has been announced, which will be happening soon. Who knows what the rest of the year when it comes to GeneSys is going to lead us down the path of. So yeah.
Exciting times, you could say.
Indeed. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a wrap. I'm GM Hooly.
I'm GM Huzz.
I'm GM Kaitlin.
I'm GM Flano.
And these are not the Dice Spill Podcast, where adventure is just a roll away. The Dice Spill Podcast is a proud member of the D20 Radio Network. For more information about the network, visit www.d20radio.com. The Dice Spill Podcast is a fan-generated podcast. All of the information provided on the podcast and related website are not affiliated with Fantasy Flight Games or any of their licensed swords. The content of this podcast remains the property of the Dice Spill Podcast and is intended for educational and informational purposes only. The GeneSys Role Playing Game, GeneSys logo, content, and all material remain the property of Fantasy Flight Games. Speaking of plugging things, should we talk about...
Are we not doing phrasing anymore?
You plug that up.
Wow, that may have been a little bit inappropriate. But anyway.
I didn't think we were speaking about that. This topic took a wild tangent.
You need to cut that. That needs to be cut.
No, we
Oh my
don't.
God.
No, fuck it.
You can save it for the after that.
okay.
But holy
That's
crap,
true.
that sounded so wrong.
How else can I say it, though?
Endorsing, promoting,
No, okay.
Yeah.
plugging.
So I did say butt plugging. So that's
Well,
fine.
plugging is just the general term for butt plugging.
Okay. I'm very old. All right.
Not old enough to plug, apparently.
Right.
Apparently not that old.